This episode of the Deep Thinkers podcast is brought to you by Bright Island Outreach. You can visit them at their website at www.brightislandoutreach.org. There you can donate straight to the cause, or you can buy a t-shirt. I wear mine all the time. It's a black t-shirt with a gold graphic on it. It's the Ahimsa. They've customized it to be their logo. It's the logo that it's kind of like the logo that you see when you listen to this podcast, but a few different details that have changed, but very similar. Also, if you'd like to, you can go with them down to the DR. They go down to the Dominican Republic many times a year. There, they are networked with the local dental schools, so they take local students down into the impoverished areas, and there they provide education and hygiene, as well as extractions, fillings, root canals, cosmetics, and most importantly, follow-up. They make sure that the people down there are getting the constant care that they need in order to have good, healthy teeth. So check them out at brightislandoutreach.org, and please donate to the cause. Thank you. This episode of the Deep Thinkers podcast is brought to you by Cradle Pest Control. Cradle Pest Control was founded in 2002. It's been family owned and operated ever since. Their main gig is termites and scorpions, but they do general pest control, weed control, and rodents. When you call in to schedule your first appointment, please mention the Deep Thinkers podcast and you will get $30 off your first service. Again, that's cradlepestcontrol.com. Go ahead and check them out. 2 items of housekeeping before we dive into this podcast. First off, I get Anna's Twitter handle wrong. It's actually at Maltese Anna. That's at MALTESEANNA. So if you are not already, then you'll probably want to reach out and follow her on Twitter and YouTube. The other order of housekeeping is when we're talking about David Avocado Wolf, I failed to come back and make this connection, which might make the story make a little more sense. I was on Facebook and noticed that Yvette D'Entremont, the science babe, had posted a article that she had written about David Avocado Wolf, and then followed it up just a few minutes previous to when I was looking at it, saying David Avocado Wolf is throwing a tantrum on Twitter. Not wanting to miss the drama, I hopped onto Twitter, and he was, in fact, throwing a super huge temper tantrum. Yeah, it was pretty hilarious. And me being a bit of the fire starter that I am, I started kind of poking and goading him. And he kind of in turn rounded on me. So that's the whole reason that he even took notice of me. I wish I had taken those screenshots of where he challenged me to a cage match, because it's hilarious. But lesson learned, what can you do? But please enjoy this episode of the Deep Thinkers podcast. It's 3 hours. Oh my gosh. I've never recorded a podcast this long before, and this is over twice as long as I normally make them. It's all good stuff. Anna has had such an interesting life and career, and she has so much unique insight to offer. I'm glad that we got to sit down and do a podcast. I really enjoyed it. I hope you enjoy listening to it as much as I enjoyed recording and editing this. So thank you, Planet Earth. Please enjoy. Hello, Planet Earth. Today I have a most excellent guest. I'll introduce you to her by reading her short Twitter bio. It follows: archer, martial artist, former Simpsons animator, actor, stunt performer at Blizzard, armchair historian. Theodore Roosevelt is my Patronus. Today I have with us Anna Maltese. Anna, how are you doing this morning?
I am doing well. How are you?
I am fantastic. Thank you so much for coming on the Deep Thinkers podcast.
Well, thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, for sure. Now, I reached out to you on Twitter after reading that short but impressive little bio, and we kind of started following each other, and I was like, this person is awesome. Like, I've got to have her on the show.
That's way more kind than I deserve, but thank you.
So now you're out in LA, right?
Correct. Yes.
Very cool. I'm in Arizona, so I've lived in Redondo before. I lived in LA for 10 days. This is the last time I made it. It was right. It was during the Oscar season when The Revenant was getting its awards.
Oh, and that's why you left after 10
yeah.
days. No,
Oh,
Oscar season. Screw this. No.
I was in Beechwood Canyon, like the spot, working at an Airbnb, and it was just there was too many people. It was
No. Oscar, it's a company town. It's a company town. So when Oscar season happens, forget about it.
Totally. It was pretty pretty impressive how a city that big could just come to a crawl that suddenly and just stop. So, but congratulations to you you're pretty hardcore if you can make it there year round. So that's pretty awesome.
It's what you're used to. It's like, again, it's a company town. It's like Pittsburgh with the steel mills. It's the movie industry is what moves this moves this town most. So
yeah, my good buddy's in the industry. He's Kevin G. Lee. He's a producer out there, and he does a lot of good work. He's come on the podcast before. He put me on my film that I was involved in. I have a IMDb credit.
Oh, what?
So,
No, what was it? What do you have?
It's a short film called Kiss the Devil in the Dark, and it stars Doug Jones, Damian Clark, Sonia Mariaki, I think is how you say her last name. She was in The Tudors. She was one of Catherine's handmaids. Then Amarita Achara, who was in Game of Thrones. She was a Dothraki handmaid.
Nice.
Jake Norseman was in it. Amy Leah, Rick Macy, and there's like 3 other people that I'm forgetting that they're just going to roll their eyes because I haven't given them any props yet whenever I've talked about it on my show yet. I got to go.
You'll remember like 2 hours from now and be like, oh, God, that.
Yeah, I'll probably end up, when I do the housekeeping episode for today's episode, I'll probably end up giving them all a shout out on there just to kind of,
awesome.
Just to be cool. But
You say Doug Jones, and now I can't think of anybody except the Senate candidate from Alabama who put away the KKK members, who's running against Roy Moore now.
Oh wow! Because we're very political. Yeah. Doug is he was the Silver Surfer in Fantastic Four.
Oh, God. Okay.
He was Pan in Pan's Labyrinth. He was The Watch with Ben Stiller and Jonah Hill. He was the alien, or all the aliens. Basically anything with real heavy prosthetics and a lot of contortionism they give that goes to Doug. He's probably the nicest human I've ever met, in any industry. And he's super cool, super nice guy.
Awesome.
It was a lot of fun. It was a troubled production, but it's been good. It's touring festivals right now. It was produced by Kevin Lee and Ken Fox, and it was directed by Jonathan Martin. So what did you do on it? Well, originally I was supposed to be an extra. I was supposed to be homeless man number 1. And especially, I was going to be catcalling Sonia Mariaki as she walked in. It's a great role. Good thing I got cut, especially in today's temperature with everything going on. That's not the one thing I'd want to be known for on the screen is catcalling. But I was supposed to catcall her as she walked in, being homeless man number 1. I had grown my hair out all crazy, and my beard was even more disheveled than it is now. But that got cut for production cost purposes, and then I put together the set, and I could use a nail gun, and
good skill to have.
Yeah, so apparently that I was the only one that could use a nail gun that day. I walked on the set and immediately thought I needed to go to a beauty salon and change my haircut. I was the only guy without the Hare Krishna haircut, where it's shaved here with the long mohawk. So I pulled my buddy, I pulled Kevin aside. I'm like, half joking. I'm like, man, should I change my haircut? He's like, no, dude, you're fine. I'm like, I didn't get the memo, So, but yeah. So that was my one credit there. I've wanted to do more stuff, but it just hasn't come hasn't made it around. But Kevin and I still stay pretty close, so he's always working, but starting to stay busy. So now, when we were trying to line this up, there was a lot of going back and forth on Twitter, and a lot of it was, "Hey, can I hit you back? I'm walking right into jiu-jitsu right now." You have a history with martial arts. How long have you been doing martial arts?
I've been doing it since I was 10.
Nice.
And it's so in my family we always learn two music. The rules are we learn two musical instruments. We take up one art form. We have to learn one physical activity. So in mine, I chose martial arts, and my base is. I mean, I started out in Taekwondo, like all kids at that time did, and yeah, it was just the most. Taekwondo was just the most prevalent thing around, and I felt like something was missing from it for me. So eventually, I was introduced to Polly Zink, who teaches monkey kung fu, and I found that Chinese martial arts really syncs up well with me.
Cool.
And after some years, he moved out of LA because he just can't really stand it. And
I get it.
Yeah, right. And I got his permission to train with Coach Eric Chen at the National Wushu Training Center.
Cool.
So I've been training under that school for 10 years, something like that.
Nice.
And it's wonderful. I got to actually perform with the Beijing Wushu team at one point because we had a joint school production that had to do with like Chinese pirates and stuff. And
very cool.
It was a lot of fun. I thought I was going to puke the first day of warm-ups.
I've been there. Yeah. Been there a lot. Yeah.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
It's a horrible, wonderful feeling.
I've talked about that on this podcast actually a couple of times. I've had a couple of my jiu-jitsu coaches come on here, and there's been a couple times where you get your throat starts to seal up, you can't breathe, and you know that you just need to get off the mats and into the bathroom. They
let you off the mats.
Oh yeah, yeah. They're like, no, that's the one rule with that. It's like, hey man, it happens to everybody. Just get off the mats. So the trick is trying to get your shoes on fast enough because you don't want to walk across the floor in your bare feet either.
Right.
Right. My coach, he's he's not overly traditional, but he does have his few things that he's very traditional on. And
right.
One thing is if you're on that mat, unless you're doing a no gi class, you got to have a gi on, and obviously no shoes on the mats, no bare feet on the floors, and that's more for keeping the mats clean and in good shape, and also preventing sickness and things like that. So I get it, but when you're sitting there, I wear slip-on Vans 90% of the time, so I'll just kind of slip them on my feet, and you'd be surprised how difficult that is when you're spinning and just trying to get off the mats and trying to make it to the bathroom. So, but yeah, I definitely
motor functions failing.
Yes, definitely sympathize with that. So, yeah, anybody that I train with that's listening to this is laughing right now because they're like, "Oh, that's Jesse." So, but I've been doing it since February 1st, so I'm still very much a white belt. But that's happened 3 times. So, but I'm proud. I got my resting heart rate down to 85 now, so I'm stoked about that.
Congratulations.
Yeah, stepped on a nail the other day and went to the urgent care. That's how I got it tested. So got a tetanus shot.
God.
Yeah, it was not fun, but I figured it had been like 10 years. Oh yeah, it didn't. Yeah, it did. It went through my slip-on Vans. They don't offer a lot in the way of protection that way.
Maybe time to think about new footwear. I
don't know. Nah, tetanus shots are I'm good for another 10 years. I can step on nails and be good.
Oh God.
Slip-on Vans are worth it. So
okay, fair enough.
How long have you been doing archery?
I've been doing archery for coming up on 9 years at this point.
Wow. Okay.
And I actually started because a girl who I trained in Wushu with came in and said, "Hey, I took up archery. You would probably like it." And I said, I probably would. And it's funny because I grew up in a very rural area. I grew up on a ranch in the middle of nowhere in San Diego County. And I was kind of a feral kid. Like I didn't have any other kids around me my age, but we had dogs and cats and goats and a horse. And
that's awesome.
I used to like fashion crude bows out of like bamboo that grew in a stand nearby, and like crude arrows and stuff. And I would take that out on my horse and I would just go shooting. And you're a 10-year-old kid. What do you know about archery form?
That is so awesome.
I had no lessons or anything. I was just like, bam. But I thought, I'll train. I would like to try that. So I went to the range that she was going to, which is the Pasadena Roving Archers, which is where I still am. And interestingly enough, archery helped me in wushu, and it was almost like the missing link in the chain.
Nice.
Because I came to wushu from a southern kung fu style. Monkey style is very much, like you're very flexible. You have to get your flexibility down, but you're also very like, low and stuff. So my coaches would continually be calling me out on shoulder creep, where you get, everything starts getting high, and they'd be like, relax your shoulders. And I would be thinking that I was relaxing my shoulders, but they would still be, kind of creeping up after a few seconds. And in archery, you're trained to not draw with the biceps and the pecs, but to load everything into the back muscles, because that's where, they're stronger. And I started doing that, and immediately I thought, oh, well, what if I tried this in wushu? What if it's not about relaxing your shoulders so much as it is about pulling that dynamic tension somewhere better? Nice. And as soon as I did that, my coach started giving me compliments, and he's very, he's very, very traditional, and compliments are one of those things that, you save.
That's the way it should be, though. Like a real good coach is good. A real good coach, half the time you're going to wonder, does this guy even really like me? But that's
I wasted his time.
Well, yeah, because I mean, yes men coaches will make you feel great,
right?
But coaches that are real and stern are going to help you progress.
Yes, and you've earned it when they give you a compliment. You've gone beyond adequate and into okay, that's what we're looking for when they do. And so archery really helped wushu.
Very cool.
It was so unexpected and wonderful.
Very cool. Now I am a proud Eagle Scout, and of course,
awesome.
As such, you have to get the archery merit badge. So I have the archery merit badge. That is that's 99% of the extent of my archery experience. I'm not gonna lie. I think it's awesome, but I've been shooting a handful of times in the last couple of years, and it's awesome. But it's just, it's one of those things that it's like, wow, if I start to really get into this, I may not have time for anything else. I mean, that thunk when you hit the target, especially when you're aiming, when you hit the bullseye, is so satisfying. You're just like,
isn't it?
It's great.
It's just so great, especially when you hit what you're aiming at.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Now, I follow a few archers on YouTube. Most of the archers that I follow are not YouTube, but Instagram rather, are hunters. So, it is what it is. They just.
Some of my best friends are bow hunters. So.
And I totally support hunting. I think it's great. I think the system that we have set up in the United States as far as hunting is amazing. And if people were to adopt that everywhere, we would stop seeing animals going extinct as much. We would have more money for conservation, things like that. But the two people that come to mind the most are Zach Griffin and Cameron Haynes. And Cameron Haynes pulls an 80-pound draw. I mean, and
that's on compound or
on a compound bow. But he's just jacked bodybuilder that runs ultra marathons. And
wow.
he hunts bull elk, and he's out there. He's just like, it's like, man, dude, this guy physically, he has it all, and he'll make a shot at 120 yards. Like, he's insane, like insane. Maybe that's a little far. Maybe it's a little far. Maybe I added on to that. Maybe it's only 80 yards. Sometimes I'll do that. I'll throw out a number and I'll be like, wait, that might sound a little fantastical. Maybe it's only 80 yards. It was like 400 yards, Anna. Like, it was, and the thing was running away, so we didn't know the real length of the shot, but yeah, he shoots for Hoyt. I think both of them shoot for Hoyt, but
okay.
Yeah, they're awesome, and they show a lot of footage of them just out there in the shit, out there just scouting, shooting, practicing. It's cool. So Zach Griffin actually has a wife, Rocky, who is also a pro hunter, and they just had a baby this week, and she was out hunting 2 months ago with him. Like, it's like,
oh yeah.
She is a badass. And I've talked to them about coming on the show. They're real busy, but he's like, yeah, let's work it out. But
that is pretty badass.
Yeah, she's out there, little pregnant belly, and they're out there doing their thing. And she's hiking through trails, and he's just like, guys, look at my wife. Look how awesome she is. Yeah, they're super cool. Those two right there. But
nice.
Yeah. Totally. Anybody who's into archery should check them out, but especially
I will definitely
especially
check
yourself. So, what do you like to use when you shoot? Are you compound? Are you recurve? Are you traditional longbow? There's so many different bows.
I know, it's kind of wonderful. I'm a trad recurve gal myself. I have shot longbow. I've made a longbow, and I've made recurve, and I've shot compound as well. And they all have their fun attributes. I mean, compound is just, it's like a gun bow. You have the sight and the scope, and you can place your arrows right there every time.
And you feel like all geared up and armed. It's almost like you're kind of a cyborg, but not really.
Yeah.
It's got some of that feel to it.
Cyborg archer.
Yeah.
Now I want to draw that.
Yeah, for sure. You should. That'd be awesome.
But I like the lightness of a lot of longbows that are out there. The one thing that I'm not the one thing that keeps, well, let me go back. I enjoy longbow. I like how light a lot of them are compared to, a lot of the recurves that are out there. The one thing I'm not too jazzed about is a lot of them don't have the pistol grip. So your wrist kind of has this, break to it, and that can give a lot of like wrist shock to it. So the next longbow I make will probably have a pistol grip, just for, better alignment. But I do like recurve a lot. And I think the bow that I usually shoot with is a Samick Red Stag.
Cool.
I like anything Martin makes. And I especially like the Kashais. I like the Vazul. The Hungarian bows are really, really nice to shoot. So
very cool. Very cool. Yeah, obviously to get my merit badge, I had to pick up both the longbow and the recurve, but
they make you do both.
Yeah, well, back then I did. I got mine. Well, gall, I have my wallet here. I guess I carry around my Eagle Scout credit card just in case anybody tries to call me out on it. So it's.
Do you get like a 10% discount on?
I've never tried. Here we go. Yeah, well improved.
Oh, look at that!
There, yeah.
Awesome.
Issued date February 17th, 93. So yeah, back in 93, they made you learn all of them. I don't know if the Boy Scouts of America have updated the requirements or not. I'm not quite up to date, but back then they did. But anything I've shot in the last 6 years has just been compound. So
gotcha.
But
they are fun.
I grew up Mormon. I'm a skeptic now, total humanist, total atheist. But I did go on a Mormon mission, and I went to England and Wales. England and Wales. And I've been to the place where they developed the longbow. It's a mountain. It's actually it's really hard to tell historically where the borders of Wales and in England begin, because we'd be in parts of, because I was in Bristol, and in the air. My mission went from Aberystwyth, Wales, all the way over to just below Stratford-on-Avon, and then down to Exeter, and then you have Plymouth and Torquay and Cornwall and all the other places over here. So I'd be in areas that were really close to Wales, and they'd be like, well, this is where the longbow was developed. And I'd be like, I thought that was developed in Wales. And they're like, well, this used to be Wales. I'm like, what? So it's actually in England, but it's a street called the Butts, the Buttes, but they say Butts, but whatever. I could probably dig through my pictures. I'm sure I have some pictures of me looking all fresh and wet behind the ears and Mormon, standing there. Look at me right here with
here to spread the word of Joseph Smith.
Oh yeah, it was interesting. I have a picture on my Instagram of me wearing a Darth Vader helmet in my suit at the train station, holding the Book of Mormon. Kevin Lee, who
is that how you went out to door to door?
No, that was kind of a novelty item. Kevin Lee, the guy I mentioned before, the producer guy, him and his now wife, then girlfriend, sent me that for my birthday, and they have to declare everything on customs. Also, like, the mission wants to know what you're bringing in, because there's a lot of rules, and so like they don't want you bringing in like headgear and boxing mitts or something. They'd be like, yeah, you're not boxing out here, guys. Like, we're keeping this.
They don't allow,
Oh no contact sports, no horseback riding, no skiing, no surfing, no skateboarding. You can't even go over the water. Yeah, the Mormon missionaries have a lot of rules. One of these days, they're out there to spread the word of God, Hannah. They're very focused young men. Like, they follow a rigid schedule. They're up at 6:30 to bed at 10:30, no exceptions. Like, you're very much like a priest at that young age out there doing that. It's pretty hardcore, but it's also a rite of passage for young Mormon men. And even back then, I wasn't like 100% sure on my future with it, but I knew that if I was going to be Mormon in the future, that this was an important step. And I got called to a really cool place, so I wasn't really complaining. If they had sent me to like Iowa, I'd be like, I mean, maybe not. I don't know.
Lovely Duke.
Yeah, I'd be like, Iowa, wow, or like North Dakota or someplace. Like, come on. That would have been a little more tough, but England and Wales was pretty cool. I've also been to Cheddar, England, the birthplace of cheddar cheese. So when I lived, when I lived in Chicago and would spend time in Wisconsin, that was kind of a big deal for people. Like, you been where? So
my favorite kind of cheese.
Oh yeah, it's pretty good stuff. Yeah. But cheese over in Europe is not like cheese over here. Cheese over in Europe is a whole new level of cheese. So
agreed.
Yeah, and we'll just never get it over here because we have to pasteurize the milk and everything, and we got all these laws to keep us safe. So all these science-based laws, yeah. But so yeah,
darn Theodore Roosevelt.
I know, gosh. Yeah. Oh yeah, we've got to talk about him for sure, because Theodore Roosevelt is definitely a badass. So one thing that I admired about you, that I learned pretty early on following you on Twitter, is that Anna, like myself, is a skeptic, which means we have a pretty strong bullshit meter. Now, when you look Anna up on YouTube, you'll see two videos that show up immediately. One is you with Yvette d'Entremont, who I think is, did I say her name wrong? I probably did.
D'Entremont.
D'Entremont.
Yeah, there you go.
Okay, Yvette. One is you with Yvette d'Entremont, who I think is just a total G. Yeah, I love how she went after Vanni Hari and David Avocado Wolf, and I think she should go after Alex Jones and Eric Dubois next. But anyways, the other video,
she is pretty wonderful.
She's pretty awesome. I'll tell people about her, and they'll be like, "Who?" And I'll be like, So eventually I want to get her on the podcast just so I can stop explaining to my friends who she is. Like, come on, guys, read a book. Like, get involved. But the other video is you debunking some false claims made by an archer named Lars Anderson.
Correct.
That video is pretty explosive. It's got at least 300,000 views by now, or
right. The video on the Skeptically Pwned channel has somewhere over 3 million views at this point.
Yeah, so I was only off by a little, like a zero.
Yeah, it was the first video I'd ever made, so I had no concept of what viral really was.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Those are strong numbers. And that video is excellent, by the way. Like it's the content is good, the delivery is good. It's anybody that hasn't seen it who's into archery, even if you're not into archery, Google Maltese, Lars Anderson, it'll pop right up. But let's talk about like what brought that about. Like obviously you got tagged in some videos, and you felt like you had a response. But what was the kind of the build up to that?
So I was tagged, by the time I decided to make a response, I had been tagged in that video on Facebook 13 times.
That gets annoying.
And it does. And every archer that I know had also been tagged in it. And we were like, to a person, everyone was like, oh, Jesus, this again. It became kind of tedious to have to respond with, well, okay, this is why this doesn't all add up each and every time. And a friend of mine, Christine McAllister, was like, why don't you do a video? Because I was, at the time, dating somebody who had a YouTube channel that he produced content on.
There you go.
So I said, okay. And I had written up a Facebook response that was public, so I just adapted that into a script, and I decided what I wanted. I collated data, I collated images that I wanted. I decided what images would go with what timestamps, and I kind of laid it out. And the ex shot it and edited it and uploaded it on YouTube, and that was that. And I just thought, this is kind of a late response. It probably won't get too much attention, but I just wanted to put it out there, and that'll just be that. And that is not what happened.
No.
I did a little bit of a podcast circuit on some skeptic sites. I got sponsored by a South African bow maker who had some very choice words about everything, and
sure.
and I just recently went to a shoot where the host was like, "I know you."
Nice. Nice. Very cool. So, yeah. Well, it's not. It must be nice to get some notoriety for setting the record straight about something that you love and are passionate about. Like I just had Chris Hansen on my podcast like 2 weeks ago, and he built. He was involved in Hellboy, building the monsters. He's worked for Guillermo del Toro. He builds monsters for Hollywood. Does some really cool stuff.
Oh, how cool!
His thing that went viral is the Squatty Potty unicorn. So he's like, I've been doing this for so long, and the one thing that takes off is this frickin' unicorn. He's like, but I like it. It's cool, So I just say to have a video go viral for something that you're passionate about. That's the golden apple right there. So, but I wasn't expecting it to go viral, but when it did, the feedback from both archers and skeptics, and importantly historians, was validating, basically. Right.
They validated my results, and as long as the people who are experts in their field concur with the methodology and the results, I'm good.
Yeah, so that's who you're trying to.
That's all I really care about.
Well, and let's talk about that for a minute. With the skeptic side of things, when somebody is setting right woo, it's not just a simple case of this is what's wrong, this is what's right. It's usually very complicated. And particularly with peddlers of woo, they muddy things up. So it's just like one of the lines you say in there is, it's so far off, it's not even wrong.
Right.
Like one of the lines you say, and that happens it happens a lot of the time with woo peddlers, where it's just, where do I even start to shoot down this crazy logic? And
right, where do I even begin to unpack it?
Yeah. No, and so I mean that from that aspect of it, I was just like, wow, she presented all his claims, cited his sources, debunked them, and actually showed what was going on that was correct. It was just, you came at it from a scientific approach that people who are into science are like, all right, yeah, this person knows what they're talking about. It wasn't just like thrown together or random. It was very well put together and very well organized. So
well, thank you. I have good people to look up to in that, and I have friends who are also very dedicated to taking apart arguments and looking at them looking at the components and deconstructing them and seeing what's right and what's wrong. And so I have a lot of people to thank for that. Basically, Yvette is one of them. She's a good friend of mine, and
very cool.
She does it very well with some really great humor.
On Twitter, she and I have had a little bit of interaction on Twitter. My biggest fear with interacting with people on Twitter is that I'm going to come across snarky. I mean, I make comments that are meant to be funny and stuff, and sometimes she's so high energy. There's been times where she's called me out on things and I'm like, is she mad? I hope not, because I was trying to be funny. But yeah, I've had a few little brief interactions with her on Twitter, and she referred to herself as the Deadpool of debunking, which I think is perfect. Yep. And I hope that she runs with that hashtag, because it's perfect. The humor and the level of just, this is what you guys are buying into with this individual. The way she shoots somebody down is just like that. It's almost like a dossier she did on David Avocado Wolf.
Oh, that was fun.
Oh, were you there? Were we talking on Twitter at that time? Because David, on that thread, he challenged me to a cage match. And I didn't know that if you didn't get he challenged me to a cage match, and I didn't know that if you didn't get screenshots, it just goes away when they block you. And so I don't have there are a few people on my Twitter feed. Yeah, I know. There are a few people on my Twitter feed that have seen it. And so I thought, and if I go back, I can probably find out who they are, and they'll vouch for it, because people were like, "Oh my gosh, he just totally challenged you to a cage match," and I was like, "Let's do it, bro. Let's do this." But yeah, that guy, I got a little rough with him. Because he and I was like, wow, I have his attention. The whole time I was tagging South Park, and I was condescending. I was like, David, you have an important message. The only medium that is worthy of your important message is South Park. They are the people that can get your message out to the masses in the way that it needs to be received. And people were like liking that. South Park probably got that tweet hit at him 50 times that day. Just because we were going back and forth. He was asking me for proof on stuff. And I was like, this guy wants proof? Like he's ever proved anything in his life, ever. David Avocado
Wolf is apparently very irony deficient.
Oh man, that's it. I was like, proof? Okay, let's do this. Why don't you prove to me those shark bracelets that you sell do anything other than make the people that wear them look lame? and then I was like, by the way, did you ever cover that? Did you ever reach out to that guy's family that got bit by the shark? You should have covered his medical bills. Yeah, I was hitting him pretty hard, and I was like, dude, I said, listen, man, every single person that you convince to forego traditional treatment and buy the woo off your site, you are responsible for their death. He then accused me of being responsible for every person's death that ever died under traditional treatment, which I didn't.
Oh, that's not hyperbolic at all.
Yeah, I didn't really follow his logic there. I was like, what? What are you talking about? Like, that's so dumb. I can't even start to tell you how dumb that is.
That's just such a, oh yeah, well you're a poo head.
Yeah, exactly. I was so like, oh, it was so, yeah, I just, he and I were going back and forth we were sparring pretty hard, and then he blocked me, and so I started like talking to him on a backup account, blocked there too. I have actually that posted on my Instagram, the actual blocked message from David Wolf. Very proud moment for me, so, but yeah, exactly. It's like, all right, achievement unlocked.
Right.
For me, maybe it's because my search engines on all my Google, anywhere I access Google, is so customized to what I look for. But how can you find something like when you type David Avocado Wolf into Google? How does something that's not a joke not come up first? You know, I mean, how does that's what I'm saying. Like for me, like everything comes up. The first 10 things, it's all a joke, and then like his serious stuff starts coming up, or the stuff that he's portraying is serious. But for me, it's like, how does that guy still get followers? How does that guy still sell woo? How is he still selling shark bracelets online? You know,
one thing I've noticed is in like, again, even though woo is not regional, I do live in LA, and I do know and have friends who are into woo.
A lot of woo.
I have noticed a drop off of people who are reposting David Avocado Wolf memes. And several of them have been coming up and saying, yeah, this isn't a site that you need to be really sharing from. It's not great.
That's one thing I've noticed, is he's starting to kind of fall a little bit.
Yeah, and it's not like I have hope that that something isn't going to come up and take his place in that whole arena's favor or anything, but at least there is one person who does seem to be falling out of favor, and it is that guy.
Well, and that guy is...
I'm still resentful that one of my favorite foods is something that he, for some reason, incorporated into his name.
Yeah, avocados are amazing, and like they're getting a bad rap now. Like,
I know, what the fuck is that? I mean, I grew up in a rural area in San Diego County, and most
avocados are your jam right there.
Oranges and avocados, man, and so just a little resentful, but whatever.
Yeah, I hear you. I get it. My thing is, like, I've talked to people that are sick. You know, they might have lupus, or they might have other diseases that they're dealing with, and like he's personally reached out to them on social media, like, hey, the pharmacy companies want to keep you sick, and go to my website. It's like,
no, motherfucker.
Like, yeah, exactly. It's like, that's exactly what I was about to say. And the problem with him is not just that he's selling woo. The problem with guys like David Avocado Wolf, Vani Hari, and Eric Dubois are that when people buy into their bullshit, they're also buying into a distrust of science and an anti-intellectual movement that is scary, and it's dangerous. So, I mean, honestly, the hardcore side of me says, no, these assholes should be prosecuted and fined and locked up and not be allowed to sell stuff. I forget his name, but there was a guy that used to be on infomercials in the 90s, and he used to sell a book that was like the 50 home remedies the FDA doesn't want you to know about. You know what I'm talking about? You remember that?
I don't remember that one, but
that guy just got locked up.
Like, what?
Yeah, that guy just got locked up years later. Yeah, I think it was a federal judge. I was reading something on it because I remember the infomercial, and I remember thinking, "What, this guy?" And I just remember he just looked so slimy in this courtroom, and I was just like, "Good, no, lock those people up, man."
Damn.
Peddling woo and spreading mistrust of science, people just don't get it. That the whole reason that we have what we have, like every morning, if you wake up at 6 o'clock, by 6:01, you have stood on the shoulders of thousands of technological and scientific giants to get you where you are in this moment. and people just don't get it. They like, they're sitting there in an air conditioned house on a busy street that they, their car in the driveway on a smartphone, looking at the internet, and they're like, you can't trust scientists, bro.
You're right. Oh my God. That is the I get apoplectic over that because
it drives me nuts. I've gotten in serious arguments with friends over this.
Over the internet, no less.
Yeah.
A product of
well, it started with a friend that was into flat Earth theory, and I was just like,
oh my.
Okay. And then it spiraled into
CPS.
Oh yeah, it just I mean, and at one point he referenced like Game of Thrones, the ice wall, and he's like, "Oh yeah," and that I'm like, "No,
wait,
you're smoking too much weed, bro. Like you just need to calm down."
How did the wall in Game of Thrones figure into flat Earth theory? Because that is interesting to me.
Well, I guess the flat Earth theory, they have an ice wall around the edge.
Are you kidding? Really?
I don't know much about it, but I've seen. Here's the thing: when people try to explain it to me, I'm like, no, like that. That's one of those things where
frost giants from Jotunheim.
Yeah, exactly. So, but like this person was insinuating that George R. R. Martin was a believer and that he had incorporated this, and I'm like, dude, have you read Game of Thrones?
Oh,
like there's a map of the ice wall. It's straight across this little land in every book.
Right.
Like at least one.
No.
Yeah. These theories. It's like it really kind of soured me towards Netflix, because Netflix will put anything on there as a documentary, and it's like, I love Netflix, but Netflix documentaries are not documentaries. It's entertainment.
No, and unfortunately, a lot of documentaries are not documentaries.
Right.
They are Yeah. No, I mean, I know Netflix curates them. I don't know how much of their original content is this, or how much they just curate from other sources.
They curate a lot of it. I know people that have sold documentaries to Netflix, and so I mean, it's just I mean, basically, if it'll get views, they'll buy it. The thing that saves Netflix for me is, I mean, they've got good shows like Narcos and stuff, but the comedy that they're diving into, like they're giving a lot of comics specials these days.
Oh, and, good.
It's kind of a new venue, because to get a special, in comedy, you have to work your ass off, and it used to be you had to work your ass off so bad, and then maybe you might get an HBO special.
Right
now, Netflix is picking up a lot of these smaller specials for comics that are maybe kind of established but more up and coming too, but also more established. Joe Rogan's going that route. Bill Burr's going that route. It's amazing
what's happened with the television revolution. Like it used to be, back in the old days, like, oh, you don't do television, blah blah blah. But now it's amazing, like what's been going on. The fact that they now release entire seasons so that people can binge watch is phenomenal.
Right.
Like how everything changed in the last 10 years is really interesting.
Now, that's actually a really good segue into this next topic I wanted to talk to you about.
Okay.
Since the release of multiple seasons and things like that, how many people have enjoyed The Simpsons for the masterpiece that it is?
So I don't have the numbers.
That might have been rhetorical. I forget I'm talking to a skeptic. So
right. I don't know the answer to that. I will ask friends who
may have
track of that for me.
I think The Simpsons are amazing. I think that it was revolutionary for the time. I think it opened up lots of doors. for other cartoons that are the Simpsons are one of those giants that
the Simpsons. You almost said the symptoms. That's great.
The Simpsons are one of those giants that cartoons stand on the shoulders of, and it was 100% banned in the Smith home growing up. So,
oh my God!
Yeah,
I can imagine.
Yeah, within the first month of the first season, like, first of all, it was on Sunday, first strike.
Oh, great.
Yeah. Second of all, Ray and Vicky did not appreciate the way that Bart Simpson spoke to his parents. So
Ray and Vicky?
Those are my parents. Yeah.
Okay.
I call them mom and dad, but in the third person, I refer to them as Ray and Vicky. They're kind of in my hometown. They're really social. I was adopted at 3 months old, and my parents are amazing people. And all 5 of the kids in my family are adopted. It was like a very public thing growing up. People always be like, "Hey, everyone's I don't know you, but yeah, we're all adopted. Sure, different family."
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's unique, very unique. But my parents are amazing people. My mom listens to every single one of my podcasts. This sweet little devout Mormon lady, listens to my podcast.
Well, they must have been awesome to produce you.
Well, I thank you. They are pretty awesome. I wish I did them more justice most of the time, but I'm working on it. So, but they're my dad. I do a stand-up bit about my dad because he's just so innocent. He's just as pure as the driven snow in this wicked world, and it gets him into like awkward situations sometimes. But I describe him as take Christopher Walken's body, put Ralph Lauren's head on it, shrink it down a third of the size, give it a ton of energy, make it really good at accounting and taxes, and there you have my dad. But yeah, my parents are both sweethearts, and my dad uses the internet for work. The internet's still pretty magical to him. He's not super up on the technology, but my mom's pretty good. He's
still on like Ask Jeeves for.
He has a flip phone.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So he's been talking about wanting to get a smartphone, and has us all a little concerned. I provided the solution. I was like, all right, you can get a smartphone, but on your flip phone, just keep your number there for about 6 months and learn this smartphone, and then port the number. Otherwise, Big Three, his tax accounting practice, Big Three, might steer into the rocks there if you were to try to make the transition. So and we'd all be 24-hour support.
Just get like parental control on his smartphone for like the first 6 months.
Oh man, he would. I think if he has the 2 separate numbers, that would be because he can learn it. I think if he had the stress of having to have it live, that might tumble the whole thing. But if he could just learn it and then transition into it, he'd be good.
Fair enough. So, training wheels.
Well, the big thing is he can't send and receive pictures, and so that gets annoying in 2017. So,
yes.
Even if you don't text hardly at all, he's self-employed and stuff, so he's always doing it. My dad's the Energizer Bunny. Like, Mormons don't drink coffee, but what they say that coffee, my dad makes coffee nervous.
Oh, excellent.
Yeah, or that, so he's just always going, always moving, always getting something done. And so, it's just kind of funny. But
coffee would be extraneous and like gilding the lily.
Oh, and he's so pure, Anna. Like, he doesn't, like, Mormons, they don't smoke, they don't drink, they don't use tobacco or things like that. They don't drink coffee. If he drinks a Mountain Dew after like 3 p.m., he'll be up all night. Like half a Mountain Dew, like half a Dr. Pepper. He loves Dr. Pepper, doesn't drink it after 11 a.m. if he ever drinks it. So it's pretty funny. But digressing from Ray and Vicky, which all of planet Earth wants to know about,
Yes, we do.
So, but if we can pry ourselves away from that topic for just a little bit longer, how long were you at The Simpsons, or were you working with The Simpsons? On The Simpsons?
I was on The Simpsons for 13 years.
That's awesome.
and it's the best job to have. They're the best people to work with, bar none. You're an idiot if you want to leave, basically.
Why did you leave?
Well, my family's been in animation for a while.
Okay, cool.
My mom worked first at Hanna-Barbera and then at Deke, and has been at Disney Feature for like ever. Yes.
This guy has been to Hanna-Barbera World in Texas as a child.
They have a Hanna-Barbera World?
They used to.
Oh, that's awesome.
It was bought out by some other water park, but it was in Texas.
Fitting.
Yeah, it was pretty cool, you know. But
awesome. So I kind of grew up around animation and animators, and bar none, they are my favorite people as a group of people who are employed, because you draw cartoons all day. The kind of person who's drawn to that is an awesome person.
Very cool.
But I just, for me, I didn't want to retire out of animation, I guess. I'm not, I don't want to spend my entire working years behind a desk.
Okay, that makes sense.
I don't know if that sounds ungrateful. I do think it does kind of. So I wanted to see what else was out there and do other things. And I am now stepping into that.
That's awesome.
But it was absolutely the best place to work. The most generous people work there, and they are so fun. And it was not something that I expected to be able to do, and I was hired on there kind of unexpectedly. I had not gone to school for animation, so I was kind of learning the ropes on the job. And the fact that my director and AD would, sit, I tested well. I passed the test and got this job, and they kind of walked me through it on my first show, and I spent a lot of nights just sleeping at my desk and working really hard, and just because I was convinced that I did not deserve that job. And it was the scripts really make it, basically. It all starts with the writing.
Yeah.
It really does. And the writing staff is absolutely fantastic.
So witty.
Right.
So witty.
So witty. And the character designs are really fun. And it's really fun to work with that. I think at this point it's I'm relearning how to draw chins on people. But it's a lot of fun. I do Simpsons portraits for friends and family, and cool. Sometimes for book trades.
Awesome.
But it's a wonderful show. Yeah.
One of my closest friends, when I told him I was having you on the podcast, he just said, "You have to tell her that I used to call you the comic book guy." Throughout the whenever I would have long hair, he would be like, "Oh, so you're dressing like the comic book guy from The Simpsons these days, huh?" And I'd be like,
"Best podcast ever."
Like the best line he has is when The Phantom Menace came out, and he's like, "Ugh, horrible! I hated it. I will only watch it 5 more times today."
Yes.
Or he always has little good things, like
he always did. I actually worked on the episode. I loved drawing him because his every shape is like so round, and it's so much fun to draw that, like to have those like form it, like, and the flesh just kind of like is built around those bones. And I worked on the episode where he and Mrs. Skinner get together, and there was so I worked on that one, and there was another artist named Istvan,
mm-hmm.
who also worked on that. And Istvan is an amazing, talented guy, incredibly skilled, and And I was given his scenes. There's a in the process, and it's a little bit different now, but back then you would work 6 weeks on the pre-animatic layouts and animation, and then the animatic would be, you know, filmed and shown to the producers and the writers, and they would give their notes on what to fix, and then for the next 6 weeks you would do the redos and everything. So they wanted some tweaks on the scenes that Istvan had done. The thing is, Istvan draws through the characters. Like, he draws every piece of anatomy on these characters underneath their clothes, where, you know, most of us would draw, you know, basic shapes.
Yeah.
So in the scenes where Mrs. Skinner and Istvan, in the scenes where Mrs. Skinner and Comic Book Guy were in bed, he drew every piece of anatomy, and how the, you know, the wrinkled flesh on her would be smashed against his chest, and how, like, the folds of flesh would work together with these people pressed up against each other in post-coital bliss.
Oh, wow.
And it was really, like, people were coming by my desk to look at this and marvel and go, oh my God, this guy.
That's one of those things where you walk by and you stop and you're like,
you hear the record scratch, just like,
that would be, you know, I'm sure there's somebody that would pay a lot of money for those photos. That is
I'm sure
hilarious.
there are.
That is just
and
hilarious.
I'm sure I don't have any copies in my attic that I would never give out, because that is the property of Fox, and I am not going to get sued because I don't have them.
They have big time attorneys.
Oh yes. Oh my God.
So, but that's awesome. I had to bring that up just because Comic Book Guy is so just the stuff he says. Like, I remember one episode where Principal Skinner lost a bet to Bart, and he had to breastfeed a Bilbo Baggins, and he's trying to explain it to Comic Book Guy, and Comic Book Guy says something like, I know I'm going to get this wrong, but he says something, I don't even care anymore, suckle your Baggins. You know, just like, he's just always so, like, the smallest little lines that are just so good, and then he's gone.
You know? He's so great.
Oh, Comic Book Guy is great.
I did one of the Halloween episodes where
all the Treehouse of Horrors are so good. All of them are so good. Fun. Yeah.
David Silverman directed, I forget which one it was, but I did the scene. It was Lisa as Sherlock Holmes and Bart as Watson.
Yes.
And they're tracking down the mutton chop murderer, and they go by Comic Book Guy's shop, and he has these, like, you may touch my Googas, but do not, you know, you may look at my Googas, but do not touch my curiosities, or something like that. And I got to animate him in this old-timey, like, spectacle and upturned collar thing. He was just so much fun to draw. His lines are so much fun. He's so understated, but at the same time, you know, you get to play with those subtleties.
Well, and he's just like anybody that's that overweight guy with the scruffy short beard and the long ponytail with receding hairline. Yep. That's Comic Book Guy. Like, to anybody who's ever watched that, they're never not going to see him when they see that guy. So,
you know who that is immediately.
Yeah. Like,
touchstone. It's
you can be like, hey, look. You can be like, hey, look, Comic Book Guy. And everyone's like, you know, like, you know, he's just great. One of my favorite episodes is one of the ones I've got two favorite episodes. One is the one where Bart becomes the jazz drummer.
Oh, I have not seen that one.
Oh my gosh.
Oh my God.
You know, Lisa's a jazz musician. Lisa's a jazz musician, and Bart, because of his hyperactivity, they get him into drums. Okay. And he starts getting really good, and all the jazz musicians love him, but they don't care for Lisa. And Lisa's just like, oh. And they're like, we're going to call you TikTok. And she's like, I've always wanted the jazz name. Ugh, like, how can you do this to me, Bart? And they're all, we're going to call you Downbeat because you're dragging us down. Easy.
Oh.
We're trying to talk to TikTok. You know, like, it's so good. But
Oh, it's so funny because she goes through some depression and stuff, but she deals with it. Lisa's strong. She
Yeah.
rallies hard.
Yeah, she's a badass.
Yeah, she's awesome. But one of my favorite lines is they go up into the attic, and Marge is like, "What are you guys doing up here?" And the light comes on Bart, and he goes, "We're not smoking some reefer." And then she's like, "Bart!" And then like the jazz musician pops up and goes, "We're all not smoking some reefer." It's just so clever. Like I love it. And then my other favorite episode is when Homer gets his medical marijuana card.
Oh my god. I
That
worked
one,
on that one.
did you? It's so good. Like I love it when like the best line is when uh what's Doc Hibbert, when Doc Hibbert, is it Doc Hibbert? No,
Yep.
yeah, okay,
Dr.
okay.
Hibbert.
Yeah, I forgot his name there for a second. But the best line is when Dr. Hibbert's like, or when Homer goes, "I don't know, Doc. I had a bad experience with drugs." And he goes, "Homer, don't let one bad experience scare you away from drugs forever." Then they have the flashback. And he's like, "Well, isn't this illegal?" He's like, "Not with the prescription bong. Which one would you like, the skull or the wizard head?" And I'm just like,
I animated that whole scene.
did you? That scene's great. That scene is great. That whole episode.
Unorthodox. Just going to fight. Yep.
Oh, it's so good. And like the best is like the very end when he doesn't smoke anymore, and like not Mo, but who's the bus driver? What's his name?
Otto.
Otto wants to hang out. He's like, "Okay, get out."
Yeah. Yeah.
Get out. He doesn't want him to hang out anymore. It's hilarious. Like, we were good when we were just high and not doing anything, bro. But I've got a family. I've got responsibilities. I've got a nuclear power plant. I gotta go. Bye.
Well, it was a fun episode to do. We got to do some really fun animation on that. One of the best lines that I did the whole sequence where he gets high for the first time, comes back from Dr. Hibbert's office, gets high. You get that like truck in further and further and further. And then one of the best lines that I remember from there is the pan shot where the smoke is coming down the stairway into the living. I know
what you're going to say too.
And they look up, and Marge asks, "What's that?" And Lisa goes, "Smells like the art teacher's office."
It's so good. That line is so good. I've quoted that line so many times. That line is awesome. So good. Yeah, that line, I knew exactly where you were going as soon as you said that. That's one of the wittiest lines in that whole thing. Like, the high school I went to, Mountain View Toros, Mesa, Arizona. Let's go. Nice. Yeah. I think I was like a 2.4 GPA I ended up graduating with. Very high achiever.
Oh, congratulations.
Yeah. Had to show up the morning of commencement to make up tests in my guitar class. Because let's be honest, that was first hour and I wasn't making it every day. And so he passed me with like a C, and I was like, "Thanks, I can graduate tonight. I can walk the line tonight. Thank you." But I was not a high achiever in high school at all. But my high school was like, they would often place in the top 3 for, nationally for academic decathlon and things like that. Very good at sports, very good at academics, strong music program, strong arts, everything.
Excellent.
They had some, we were fortunate enough back then to have some wealthy boosters that supplied the school very well with some of the things it needed. So we had really good facilities. And we had great arts. And there was one teacher who everyone swore she smoked weed. I think she prayed it pretty close to the vest. I don't think she ever let on. But there would definitely be times where, like, a kid would walk by her desk and she'd be like, "Yeah, you need Visine." Like she'd make little comments like that. But when I heard that, "This smells like the art teacher's office," I immediately thought of Miss Smith at Mountain View. It's just like, oh my gosh, so because they had this little art nook that they all hung out in, this little lounge. Yep. They had this little setup that would connect all the rooms. It was great. So, but yeah, I'm glad you worked on that, because that is that's been one of my favorite episodes through the ages.
It was a fun one to work on.
Yeah, it must have been.
I think my favorite episode to work on that I can think of was probably the gay marriage episode.
I don't think I've seen it. I need to check it out.
It's a lot of fun. It was in 2004, 2005, I think. At least production was in 2005. It might have aired in 2006. I don't remember.
Okay.
But Nancy Kruse directed it.
All right.
And she was definitely one of my top 2 directors to work for. She had an ability to explain what she wanted in, just using like 1 or 2 lines in a sketch. Awesome. And like, yeah, I think I want you to do that, like that. She was absolutely the calm in the storm. No matter what scheduling stuff Fox would throw at us, she'd be like, yeah, our production schedule's been cut, but and we have no overtime, but we got to do it. And it's absolutely a pleasure working for her. Her email used to be Skeptiva at one point, so she was a big,
That's awesome.
I don't know if she followed like the skeptic community at that point, but
yeah, my favorite podcast is The Skeptic's Guide to the Universe. Like that's the one I'm
it's pretty rad
too. So yeah, that's more of a public service really than a podcast. Yeah,
you should have a national grant.
Yeah, I would think.
But she handled this, and she was probably the best director to handle this episode. It didn't just have really fun writing.
Yeah. It
also had a fantastic delivery on an issue that it was a worthy cause.
Yeah.
There's one point where they decide to legalize gay marriage in Springfield to increase the tax revenue, basically. And it becomes this like wonderful thing. And it was, you could tell where the writers were, making their stand. And there's a scene that I got to do where all these gay couples are, converging on the First Church of Springfield, and Lovejoy is like, just, hammering planks up over the door. And he turns to the crowd and he's like, while I cannot comment on your sinful lifestyle, I can no more marry you than I can marry, and he gives some sort of ridiculous analogy.
Yeah.
And Marge starts pleading with him. She's like, Jesus included, compassion and inclusion. And he just, as soon as she starts talking to him, he reaches over and he starts ringing this church bell as hard as he can to drown out the sound of her voice. And she's like pleading with him using the scripture, scripture on compassion. Right. And he's just like, as soon as she starts talking, he just like starts drowning her out with church bells. And it becomes an issue for her when her sister decides that she wants to get married. Like suddenly it's in Marge's lap.
Yeah.
Because Marge just wants everyone to get married and have a marriage and have a wedding and a family like how she has.
Right.
So it becomes this like, oh, well, now it's touching me. Oh, now I'm conflicted. But of course, being Marge and being the heart of the family, she comes around and she's like, no, it's exactly what I was saying before. It's inclusion and compassion and what people need to be happy is, and who they fall in love with is who they fall in love with. One of the most fun scenes that I ever got to do was in this episode where Homer and Marge are sitting on because Homer gets ordained because he's like, oh, I can make money doing this. So he gets ordained over the internet, and he's going to marry Marge's sister.
That's the same way I got ordained, by the way, is over the internet.
Oh, excellent.
In the Church of the Latter-day Dude.
The Church of the Latter-day Dude?
Yes.
Is this like a Big Lebowski?
That's our Bible, is the Big Lebowski.
That's fantastic.
The Doodly Llama organized it, I think, maybe 6 or 7 years ago. So we spread the gospel of fuck it and take it easy, man. So
that would solve a lot of problems today, I think.
Yeah, I've performed 2 weddings to date. So yeah.
Congratulations.
Yeah, I don't charge them. They're just close friends. So.
Oh, that's nice.
But yeah. So go ahead though. That was a little side topic there. But yeah.
Oh, I love that tangent. But Homer, so they're both up in their bedroom before the before the wedding, and Marge leaves and she's kind of frustrated, and Homer just looks over at the mirror and goes, "You handsome devil, someday they'll let you and me get married. Can you imagine the children?" And then you go into this thought balloon where Homer's daydreaming about being married to himself, and there are two Homers standing next to each other, gazing fondly down at this brood of 10 little Homers who are just running around in diapers, like falling over each other and fighting with each other and just being really stupid. And then the two adult Homers look over at each other and go, and they just fall into this passionate embrace, and they're making, like, open mouth making out. Just, "I love you, Homer. Oh, Homer. Oh, Homer." And Nancy acted this out for me, and she's like, "No, I really want you to get the acting into it, like open mouth making out, and like have one Homer hand cupping the other Homer hand's ass. Really, like, and like you're gonna make another baby." Okay. And,
I love it. Because that's one of the things that made The Simpsons so good, was the edgy animation like that. Like Homer grabbing the other Homer's ass. Like,
right.
like stuff that you.
And then South Park took it and just ran even farther with it.
Oh my gosh, South Park! They are, and I was going to ask you about that, because I've heard that they will be making changes up till like the hour that they. Yeah, I've heard they're running down the hallway with the master going, "Okay, we finally got it done. All right, we made it. Okay, cool." And I've heard some of their best stuff comes from that. But it sounds like Simpsons is a little more pre-written, a little less improvised. It sounds like you guys are actually running a real production over there.
Simpsons has always been. So it's been a couple of years since I've been on the show, and a lot of things have changed. But it's hewn to up until the movie was made. Basically, Fox had this attitude of we don't know how this works. It's not broken, so don't touch it.
Right.
Which is fair. They farm out the animation to the Stars Animation, and it's still in some ways, not. Let me rephrase this. It still uses aspects of animation that other animation studios don't. But it totally works for it. I mean, they still use layout, which other studios don't. Every other studio basically cleans up their storyboards and films them in an animatic and then sends them overseas. And Simpsons has been doing as much of that as they can, but they still use layout, which is quite which is not what other studios do anymore. You still have the Alf Clausen Orchestra, which still scores each episode, and that's just not done either.
That's so awesome. And the intro is always slightly different,
right,
which is so cool.
You have the blackboard, you have the couch gag. It's
just always a little bit. I mean, the same, but just little subtleties, and that's what makes it so cool. And that's when someone's a true fan, they'll call those subtleties out because they've seen that intro a million different times and they've seen it just change a little bit. Now I've heard that every Simpsons episode has a guest star, even if it's just like a quick "oh my gosh," and that's their only line. Is that true, or is that like a myth?
I know that they've been using a lot of guest stars. I don't know if everyone has one, but I would not be surprised. Again, I've been off the show for a couple of years, so and I haven't been as faithfully watching it as perhaps I should.
It's all good. It's all good. I'm not trying to call you out.
That it's one of those things where people want to be on The Simpsons as a guest star. So
unless you're Jose Canseco.
My.
Well, I read his book. And, I loved baseball during that whole era. Like when he was a rookie, like that's when I started collecting cards, and I still like baseball cards. It's one of the weird attachments I have to my childhood. Anyway,
it's not weird.
But I read his book when he wrote his book Juiced about steroids and baseball, and
Okay.
he talks about the Simpsons. And he's like, I was always grateful to be on The Simpsons, but I always felt like they never gave me a fair shake. Like they always kind of made me out to be a seedy guy with like ulterior motives. And it's like,
oh my god,
bro, you're Jose Canseco, okay? Like, what are you famous for other than baseball? You know, come on, man. Like, come on, man. I saw you rescue like 8 cats from a tree in a Simpsons episode, man. Like,
oh my god,
you know, like, come on. But yeah. I was just kind of like, because I've seen him a couple times, and I was like, well, I never really got that, but he kind of paints himself as a victim throughout his whole career in that. So I wouldn't personalize that, you know.
Yeah,
it's more of
hey, you know, if the Brazil Tourism Board is gonna be upset at how the Simpsons portrayed Brazil,
really?
yeah, I'm not. You know, it's yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, there were a couple. There was an episode where there was a joke about Brazil and, you know, its monkeys biting people, and they actually did I think a press release.
Wow.
Stating our monkeys don't bite people or something like that. I'm not. I didn't read it myself. I may be shooting myself in the foot with that. But they actually came out and were like, contrary to what the Simpsons may say. And it's like, dude, it's just a cartoon.
First of all, it's a joke. Second of all, I don't care if you have the most docile monkeys on the planet, the most well-behaved monkeys. They're going to bite somebody. Like, monkeys bite things, you know.
That's what monkeys do.
I wonder,
they bite and they throw food.
Yeah, among other things. That.
Yes.
Yeah, monkeys are not well-behaved primates, which some would argue that humans aren't for the most part either. But
I would argue that too.
If that board made an issue about that joke, I wonder what they thought of when Rick and Morty went to Brazil to make first contact with that tiny little species, or that tiny little civilization that had nuclear capabilities. Have you seen that episode?
I have not.
Oh my, it's good. Like, Rick shows up in his car, and the Brazilian army shows up, and they're like, "Hey, we're here first." And Rick's like, "Back off, guys! You don't want to test me. The casualties would be in the Brazilians." Get it? Because we're in the rainforest. You know, it's so funny. But like, I'm not gonna spoil the whole thing. But when the president gets there, he's gonna shrink down and go talk to him, and he takes these pills. And Rick's like, "Oh, you shrink with pills? Cute," you know. And while he's shrinking down and driving all the way into this little civilization, and the reason they're there is because somebody stumbled upon it and they launched nukes, and so they're going there to set up contact. By the time he gets there, Rick has just zapped there, made the deal, and then zapped back. And so the president's pissed, you know, and so he drives back, and he's taking the pill to get bigger and to be cool. Rick left him a shirt because, you know, he's growing into his clothes, right? And so the tiny little person gives him this shirt, and by the time he grows up huge, he doesn't have any pants, nothing else, and his shirt's like a crop top that's like right below his chest. And the president's people are like, "Why would he do that, sir?" He's like, "'Cause he's an asshole." You know, like, it's just it's so funny, you know. But yeah, other than The Simpsons, I would say my trio of cartoons these days, my power trio are Simpsons, Rick and Morty, and Family Guy, just because they're so funny. But then Futurama's great. Aqua Teen Hunger Force is great. There's just so many funny cartoons these days, and I
like Bob's Burgers a lot.
Archer is great. Oh my gosh, how does Archer get away with some of the stuff that they get away with?
You know, it depends on your distributor. I mean, basically
don't get me wrong, I love it, but that's a great question though. How do some of these cartoons get away with this? Like, that is actually a pretty good question. from
part of it is where is your network, is your distributor, basically. You know, I mean, there are different rules for different networks, and it's, you know, part of it is an opening up of the culture itself, you know.
Yeah, I have a friend in our early 20s. We used to hang out at his house. He lived with his parents, and we would smoke weed all night and just watch Cartoon Network. And his dad actually has agreed to come on my podcast. His dad is just such an interesting character. He's an old school Catholic gangster who grew up in Arizona, and he grew the 4th largest amount of weed ever grown in U.S. history on American soil in the 80s. Got caught and beat the rap.
That's Yankee ingenuity. Sorry.
Oh, he got caught and beat the rap. Like, didn't do a day in jail. So he's going to come on the podcast and talk about some of that. But he sold cars forever, and he's a big guy, smokes cigars. I talk about him in episode 13 with Tate Gunning, because he's an old baseball coach and just a prominent guy in my community. But he would wake up in the morning at like 4:30 or 4 to get ready to go to the car dealership, and he would turn on the TV and it would be on Cartoon Network from the night before. Like, we were watching Adult Swim. When he turned it on, it would be stuff for like 1-year-olds and 2-year, like Caillou,
right.
And he would be like, these stupid boys smoked that dope and it melts their brain. I don't know how they can watch that. We were just like, oh gosh, no, that's not what we're watching. It was so hilarious, because he's like, I don't know how you boys can watch that stupid stuff. We'd be like, oh wow, nope. But
so off the mark.
Yeah, it was, and if you only knew the genius of what we had been watching the night before, But yeah, cartoons have come such a long way, and it's all the Simpsons are what started it. I think 10, 15 years from now, when the Simpsons is in its 65th season,
which it will be.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's always got good content. It's never jumping the shark, so to speak, or anything like that. It's always moving forward. It never gets stale. And just when you think it's going to, an episode comes out that crushes it, and the numbers are right back where they were before.
Awesome.
But I love it.
There's always something to reach back on, though, beforehand, and there is some precedent. There was a show. There was an animated series called "Wait Till Your Father Gets Home."
Yes,
that
I
aired
remember
before
the theme song, even. Yeah,
and it broke some ground in that as well. There's always something that leads to something else, which leads to something else,
right.
Which leads to things breaking open. And there's stuff that South Park and later shows can do, which The Simpsons can't, simply because of the rules of the network.
Yeah, and also Simpsons, as broad as its audience is, there's still people that watch The Simpsons that don't watch Family Guy.
Right.
So I think if The Simpsons were to push it even more with some of the edge, like not even more, because they push it pretty far in The Simpsons, but if they were to push it in the same ways that Family Guy were to, or Rick and Morty, it just wouldn't ring true for what The Simpsons has become. It's almost like a flavor of comedy now.
Right.
It's like its own flavor.
The key to The Simpsons has always been that the heart of it is the family. It's always been like keeping that strong. Right. And South Park and Family Guy, even though the term is family, and these other shows, they explore different territories, and they break out into new things. In Family Guy, the heart of it seems to be Stewie. Yeah. And Stewie and Brian's relationship, and it's hilarious.
Right. Yeah.
South Park gets into long story arcs with Stan's disillusionment and everything, and it's it has its own charm and also draw, I guess. And
yeah, it seems to be more of like less family based, more like small, more community based. It seems like with a lot of its story.
Right, right. It has a broader kind of statement to make.
Right.
And with The Simpsons, no matter what, it has to come. The rule is it has to come back to how this family operates and how it thrives or challenges it faces. So that's always been the rule. So that's going to be
story. Yeah, it's working. It's they're doing really well. Kind of moving on. How long have you been at Blizzard now?
So I am on a contract basis with Blizzard. So I have done one. I've only done one cinematic with them.
And that was the World of Warcraft movie.
No. That was not the World of Warcraft movie. That was
Legion,
that was the
video game. It was Legion, right?
Right. Okay. That was the cinematic.
Gotcha. Very cool. How cool was that to work on that?
It was so cool.
Yeah. Did they put the little
it was really cool because
all over you and stuff and like?
No, because I didn't need to have for that one. I didn't need to have. They do that for the for like close-ups and stuff. I didn't. What they needed me for was film reference, acting reference, and archery consultation.
Very cool.
So, so I didn't need the little ping pong balls. I didn't need the dots on the face.
Yeah.
The center of the main character was Varian. Mm-hmm. And it was sort of his story being told. I was, the other main character, but or cool. Sylvanas was the other main character, but yeah.
Cool. Right on. Has Comic-Con knocked at your door or anything like that, trying to get you to come to Comic-Con and things like that? I know once you play those characters, they have a role. They have a way of creating cult followings that usually are pretty adoring of the person in the role. So
I go to Comic-Con as a professional. They just let me in for whatever reason. But they have it's been a lot of fun. I don't play the game myself, and when I was approached about it, I was like So when I was approached to do it, the lead on the animation team contacted me, and he's all, "Hey, we need an archer who is a female. Would you be interested in being in a cinematic? And here's some examples of what we do." And I was like, sure. And so I looked at the cinematics, and I'm like, oh my god, these are beautiful. This is such beautiful animation.
Yeah.
and I had heard, I'm not a gamer, but I had heard that video game animation had been growing in leaps and bounds, and that the bulk of animation had been going toward that, and that it had surpassed the film industry. And I called my mom after they contacted me, and she's been in the animation industry for decades, and she's like, "Oh, honey, they're doing amazing stuff. You should."
That's awesome.
So, so I, of course, I said yes, and I said, what exactly is it for? And he's like, "Well, I can't tell you exactly, but I will say that you're going to be playing a character who inhabits a world where people are at war, and they have to use their various crafts to survive." And I stupidly didn't get it at first.
That's so awesome.
Oh, yeah,
I didn't get it.
An hour later, I'm like, wait a minute. And it was like a joke grenade. You pull the pin, you throw it, and after, you're like, oh! It was awesome. I mean, again, I was working with animators.
Right.
So, and the director, Mark Messenger, is just one of the greatest people you could ever hope to meet. He's the spitting image of Patton Oswalt. So
awesome. I love Patton Oswalt.
Dude, like, I have and meaning no disrespect to Mr. Oswalt and his recent marriage to Meredith Salinger. I have had a crush on Patton Oswalt for however long. And
that's awesome.
So, like, meeting a guy who looks just like him, I'm like, oh my god, hi, you're awesome.
One of the things I love about Patton Oswalt, and I need to suggest this to Kevin Folta as well, is he has a Twitter troll army. if you mess with Patton Oswalt online, it will be the worst thing you ever do for your Twitter presence ever, because they will destroy you.
Yep.
Yeah, he's kind of protected by his fans, and I think that's awesome.
I like that too.
Yeah,
I love that he is TV's son of TV's Frank.
Yes.
On the new MST3K. It's so perfect.
Oh yes.
Oh my god. Oh my god.
MST3K is one of those shows that I don't know if it has a cult following with today's youth, but when I was in high school, me and my buddies were watching that all the time. Like, I graduated in 1997, and me and Kevin Lee, the guy I keep talking about, the movie guy, would watch MST3K all the time. Like, we'd be sitting there, like, just going throughout the day, and one of us would hit something, and we'd be like, Mitchell! Like, Mitchell, heart pounding, Mitchell, veins clogging, or like.
Even his name is that a beer?
Exactly. Like, Joel, why would anyone want to do that with Mitchell? Like, it's just so.
Make run fast.
Hi, Mitchell. Word on the street is that you're a jerk.
You're right.
Oh.
So I have the theme song as my cell phone ringtone.
That is awesome. That is awesome.
Before that, my ringtone was the Torgo theme ringtone from Nano's Fate.
I am Torgo. I deliver the pizzas while the master. Like, did you ever see Torgo's Pizza? Like.
Oh my god.
Oh my gosh. Oh.
It's the best. I used to have that on audio while I was when we switched over to digital animation on The Simpsons. I used to have MST3K on for the audio while I was animating, if I didn't have to use the sound, the track.
That's so awesome. I love the Cave Dwellers. Like, why is she limping? She got shot in the shoulder with an arrow. Oh. Or
who
like,
is this simple stranger with pecs like melons and knees of fringe?
That's one of the. Who is this stranger with pecs of melons and knees of fringe? It's so good. Or like I should have seen this coming. I have read the script. There's just so many good snarky little, and when they reenact that scene, like Joel and his two robot buddies, when they're all, like, Joel, you don't think this is stupid? No, really, it is, Joel. It
is.
That was such a good show. Yeah, it was. Again, a lot of those shows, the comedy hit kind of before its time, like with Family Guy, and then they went away and came back. The Simpsons was one of those few shows that it stayed and then just kept gaining ground. Just kept going up. But there's so much good comedy from that era. Well, Mr. Show with Bob and David is a classic. What else?
Oh god, my best friend is like her. That's her favorite.
Yeah, well, Bob Odenkirk and David Cross have gone on to have great careers of their own. There's an episode of the Joe Rogan Experience where Maynard Keenan is on, and he's talking about. He's the lead singer of the band Tool.
Okay.
And he's talking about his early days touring with Tool. And he's big into comedy. He loves it. And he would take David Cross or Tenacious D as his opening bands. And like someone like you or I were like, oh yeah, I'm going to go to that for sure. I get to see a comic and then I get to see Tool. They would get shit on so bad by the crowds. Well, first of all, Tool fans are... Even Maynard can't stand Tool fans. Like, Tool fans are just... They're notoriously kind of shitty people. I mean, I shouldn't say that, because I love everybody, but it's just Tool fan, they've...
Hashtag not all Tool fans.
Yeah, hashtag generalizations, they would go expecting a metal band, and then they get someone telling jokes, so they get booed off the stage, and he'd be like, guys, these are my friends, first of all, and second of all, like, you just booed off Jack Black, but it was before they all hit. It was in, early 90s. And so now that they've all had their careers established, he was telling this story on Rogan's podcast where he goes, hey, he saw David Cross and he's like, hey, we got this new Tool album coming out. We're going to be going on tour. David Cross is like, hell no. No. Never do that again. But
I've paid my dues. I don't need to do that. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and I do a little comedy. I do some local open mics and things like that, just enough to really be considered a poser. If I'm really honest, there's 4 dozen local comics in Phoenix that I can name off the top of my head that are all harder working than I am. But it's fun to make people laugh, and so just to hear that story from a comics perspective is like, God, that would be the worst. You think you're getting hooked up on this big tour, and after the third show, you realize it's just going to be a gauntlet. But
and hats off to anybody who chooses that route. Stand-up comedy is the most punishing, one of the most punishing careers I can think of. That's a thankless job, and you're out there like on the front fucking lines.
Especially in LA. In LA, what it takes to make it in LA, because me, at my most active, I'll be doing 2 or 3 open mics a week.
Oh, okay. Yeah, you need to be doing.
Yeah, I like I said, I am a poser when it comes to like hardworking comics. In LA, your average comic will be doing that a night.
Yeah.
So like they'll hit one open mic, go to the other, they'll wait an hour, they'll drive an hour, wait 45 minutes to do another 5 minutes, and they'll do that 2 or 3 times in a night. The reason I do it is because it's fun to do it. 2, when you do get those laughs, it's like a shot of a drug. It's just that's right. Like when you really get a room and like they're really like when you set it up well and they get it and it closes good and it just comes together for the laugh. That whatever cocktail of chemicals your brain is creating at that moment, that is the shit. So
I absolutely agree. That's so cool.
Yeah, but it's a lot of fun. A lot of my stand-up that I do is just I've lived kind of an unconventional life. Got back from my mission and just as weird as it sounds, I saw the movie The Legends of the Fall and decided that I wanted to get the hell out of Mormon Mesa. So I moved to Idaho, which is an even stronger concentration of Mormons. But I stayed there for a year, and it didn't work out that well. Then I went to LA. I was in Redondo Beach for about a year, maybe a little more, and I loved Redondo. That was a great. El Burrito Jr. is the spot in Redondo Beach. I still miss their Mexican food, but they got the Spanish line and the English line. It's Spanish line moves a little quicker, but it's awesome. Where was I going with that?
You've lived a few places. You got out of Mormonism.
Oh yeah. From LA, I also lived in, again, it sounds weird, but Utah. I lived in Salt Lake for 7 years. My buddy's a concert promoter, and I worked for him. He owns a venue called the Salt Air. That it looks like the Taj Mahal and it overlooks the Great Salt Lake. It's the oldest property in Salt Lake or in Utah, and it's super cool. And Blade Runner was filmed there. Guns N' Roses filmed a music video there. It's got some pretty as far as Samantha D was filmed there. It's got a pretty extensive. If it had it could have its own IMDb page, but So it was a lot of fun doing concerts and stuff there. Had a great time partying up in Salt Lake. It was Utah's the best kept secret in the country.
It is a really beautiful state. I went to Salt Lake with my cube mate, actually from Simpsons one time.
Cool.
He is what I think they're called jacked Mormons. Whatever.
Yeah, they call me a post-Mormon,
Post-Mormon.
Yeah. Jack Mormon is when you're still kind of in it, but you drink and you have sex and you do whatever, but you're still kind of Mormon,
So my cubicle mate on Simpsons just asked me one day, "Hey, you want to go to Utah? Want to like make a road trip out to Utah?" I'm like, "Yeah, that sounds like fun." So we took a week off. And we drove out to Utah, and it was the first time I had seen the Rockies.
Wow.
And everyone should see the Rocky Mountains. It's a beautiful city, I gotta say. And we took the tour of the temple. And what was fun
the one that Stephen Fry got kicked out of. You should Google that or YouTube that. I'm
going to. Yeah, that's amazing.
Funny.
So we went up to a couple of he sort of directed this, going around this few days that we were there, and he went up to these Mormons who were obviously working at the temple. They were these missionaries.
Were they the older ones or the younger ones?
They were the younger ones.
Okay, yeah. They send them out at 18 now if you're a guy, and 19 if you're a girl. They're babies. Yeah.
Little ones.
Yeah.
They were probably women in their 20s, and they had the full skirts and everything, and
those poor sister missionaries have to wear the ugliest clothes. I feel so bad for them. At least guys can wear suits, At least,
I can't wear. I love pants. So, we went up to them and, we asked them if we could take the tour, and they were so polite. And they're like, well, yes, absolutely. And they wanted to know what we did. And we told them what we did for a living. And they immediately asked us to draw Simpsons characters in their books of Mormon that they had with them.
That's awesome.
And I'm looking at John like, is this okay? Can we be doing this? Is this, I don't know. And he's like, huh?
Well, Mormons will take notes in their Book of Mormons. They'll highlight it. They'll write in them. So that's fairly common.
Okay, I didn't know if it was some sort of blasphemy to be like.
I actually, on my mission, I don't know if you remember, but in '98 there were 2 missionaries that got kidnapped in Russia, and they recently made a movie about it called the Saratov Approach. And after they got freed, they moved them to England to shuttle them back and forth for court, because they caught the guys that did it. One of those guys was my companion. And when he was going back to Russia to testify in court, they recognized Slayer at the airport. And so they had Slayer sign. The Mormons have this thing called a family proclamation, where it's basically their stance on marriage and the family. And it was put out in like 95, and it's marriage between a man and a woman is ordained of God and yada, yada, yada. We lived as families before here. It's just what they believe. They had him sign that, and they're signing it with the 666s and the pentagrams in it and their signatures. And he probably still has it, But yeah, there's some funny stuff like that goes on. Yeah.
Did they include that in the film at all, or?
I don't think so. That film is pretty true. Well, he had to. Mormons keep records like crazy, and they have what's called the church archives. And basically, like if you've ever had, they have different levels in the church. Like you get baptized when you're 8. When you're 12, if you're a guy, you're a deacon. At 14, you're a teacher. At 16, you're a priest. At 18, you're an elder. Above that, you can become a high priest, things like that. And it's all basically their volunteer ministry. But if you're a guy, you're on that path. If you're a girl, you're kind of on a different path. It's just kind of how they do it. So they keep records of all that. And they wanted a record of everything that happened on this kidnapping for their archives. And he was writing it on his laptop that he really wasn't supposed to have, because this is back in '98, and it was kind of like, we couldn't even do email back then. Like we only could write letters. Yeah, it was the internet was still very new and very unexplored, and Salt Lake hadn't really determined how they were going to handle it yet. So just stay away from it for now. Me with my editing skills, Mountain View Yearbook staff, 1997 or 1996, 1997. First in the nation in our yearbook. There we go. I edited this story for him over and over again. There was a couple Warren G references to the song Regulator. There was a couple things that they just wouldn't. There might have been a Nicolas Cage Con Air reference. Like, okay, guys, this is your barbecue. There might have been a few little references like that these old guys in Salt Lake weren't going to get, and just kind of slide on through. But I knew that whole story. The only thing that's made up in the movie is there's a part where he draws something on his hand, which is supposedly some Russian mafia symbol, and the guy that's supposed to kill him sees it and doesn't kill him before he's going to kill him, and then he sees that written on his hand and doesn't. Spoiler alert! But that's the only thing that's incorrect. But other than that, it's pretty much exactly how it went. But yeah, he got hit. got invited to an appointment. He walked in, got hit in the head with a baseball bat like 6 times, got taken. They were kidnapped for 2 weeks. He lost like 30 pounds. Like, it was a horrific experience. He has scars on his wrists from the handcuffs and nerve damage. Oh yeah, it was a pretty big ordeal. I remember hearing about it because I was, in the MTC when you go on your mission, the first place you go is to Salt Lake or to Provo, Utah, and then they teach you how to be a missionary. If you're going to learn a language, they teach you all that. And so when I was there is when he got kidnapped. And when I got to England a month later, that's when he got to England. But it had become such a media shitstorm that the guys that kidnapped him because they owed money to the Russian mafia. They were just like, you know what, let's back away from this. This is bad.
This is too hot, guys.
This is bad.
Let's go to stealing hubcaps.
Yeah, exactly. Well, one night, the guy that was watching him got real drunk and like spilled his entire guts. And so they just remembered it all. And when they met the KGB and the FBI at the hotel, well, and Mormons have their own security division. So there was, they protect the apostles. A lot of it's for when the Mormon hierarchy is set up like Jesus said it had, like the Bible. You have the prophet, his 2 counselors, and you have 12 apostles, like Peter, James, John, 12 apostles. But the majority of what church security does is when those guys' cars break down and run out of gas, they go get them on the freeway. So it's kind of like AAA. But they were working with the KGB and the FBI to kind of find these guys and kind of trying to bring them back. And they just basically told them everything they remembered from that evening, and they went and arrested the guys and like, these them? Yeah, it's them. And then they went through the court system with them, and I believe both the kidnappers died in prison. Russian prisons are rough.
I believe that.
Yeah, especially in the late 90s, early aughts. So,
right.
But who knows? I mean, with Putin involved over there, who knows? They're probably just the same as they are now. So,
oh God, ex-KGB agent who defends president. Hey.
Yeah, I mean, that guy's such a gangster. It's so crazy.
Oh my God.
Yeah. It's a couple years ago, a bunch of pictures came out online of him that were just bizarre, like of him shirtless leading a horse or like walking through a river. Yeah, I made him my Facebook profile pages for a while just as a joke, and then people were like, "Why are you?" I'm like, oh, "Whatever, you guys aren't getting it. They'll stop." But like I could just see him thinking, "The people need to know that I'm rugged and manly. We must release these photos so my image, It's just,
right. You're not rugged and manly. I mean, no offense. And now Alex Jones is like recreating those. I don't know if you've seen those.
Oh my gosh, Alex Jones.
Yeah, following in Putin's footsteps, he decides to, why should I hide this from the world?
Yeah, and, Alex, what makes you think the world wants to see that?
He's one of those. Like, I can't believe he's as young as he. Like, he's only what?
He's 40,
like he's 38.
Yeah, I don't even think he's 40 yet. He's younger than Joe. He's like 10 years younger than Joe Rogan, his buddy.
Oh my God! Yeah. And then Steve Miller is 31 or 32 now, and it's the opposite of Dorian Gray. They have a portrait in their attic that keeps getting younger. And they're just like aging.
Well, Alex Jones, I'm convinced at any moment is going to have a heart attack or stroke.
Yes. He's absolutely going to, he's putting himself through so much strain and stress.
Oh my gosh.
No way that a body can take that much.
Yeah, and and like I have people that will, because I can't, he just gets my goat. I went down that rabbit hole for a while, for maybe 2 or 3 months, and then it started to get real crazy, and I was like, all right, I don't want anything to do with this. But I have friends that love him, and I'll just be like, and their argument is, even if only 20 or 30% of what he says is true, and I'm like, stop. If you had a doctor that was right 30% of the time, why would you pay that person to do? If you had an attorney that could only deliver 30% of the time, like, there's no profession on the planet that is going to exist if they're only right 30% of the times. Like, it just,
30% of the time, he's right 100% of the time.
Exactly. Like 30%, that's not even a failing grade in high school.
Nope.
Like that's well below failing.
So I just looked it up, and he's 43, so he is,
okay. He is
older than me.
Okay.
And it's, yeah. But still, I mean, oh God, he's like, yeah, you can't put yourself through that much strain on a daily basis.
Well, I would like to get into his line of logic, because he just jumps from one thing to another. I mean, that guy it would seem that he's fully convinced that correlation equals causation no matter what. And it's like, no, but I mean, yeah, I don't know. I mean, Obama's come and gone, and he probably woke up and thought that, oh, dang it, I forgot to take their guns away. I mean,
right.
it's
and it was on the top of my post-it list.
Yeah, like no one's in FEMA camps,
Sharia law.
Yeah. Oh my God.
Force everybody into gay Muslim marriages. Oh God, I totally forgot about my hidden agenda.
The big thing for him with me was the grievance actors. Because it was like, all right, dude, you sell these stupid conspiracies, and that's one thing. But these people have had a tragedy in their life. Like with the Sandy Hook grievance actors, he was saying it was a conspiracy. Oh. It was like, listen, man, these people's kids just got killed, and you're going to go on TV and make money saying they didn't? Like, you're an asshole.
That is the one. Like all other, everybody has their one, I don't know what you want to call it, but knee-jerk, reflexive anger button. In woo. And like for some people it's vaccines, and for some people it's
GMOs.
Yeah. For this one, this is the one that's my knee-jerk, like instant anger go-to, because it's not just cruel, it's not just wrong, it's beyond cruelty. It's you're going after people in the most vulnerable of grief at that moment. You're going after family members, and like, oh look, there,
and not just family members, but you're going after parents grieving over losing a child.
That's exactly it.
Which is the worst type of grief probably out there.
And you're adding on to it's in addition to having to lose a kid, which no one should have to go through ever, you're adding on to their grief by forcing them to deal with putting out fires, basically, lies. Well, people are getting death threats, and in order to even that in the grief process, that shouldn't be one of the steps.
Right. I know that these people are victims, like.
Yeah, it's unbelievably cruel.
And one of those victims' fathers was an Alex Jones guy, and then when Alex Jones came out and was like, "This didn't happen," he's like, "No, fuck you, my daughter got killed." I'm pretty sure that's the case. I may be speaking out, but I'm pretty positive that's the case. But it's just, I mean, yeah, man, like how it's like, dude, will you not do anything to make a buck? Like you're that's heartless to go after something like.
It's even more heartless than him putting up topless photos of himself.
Yeah, that is at the very least severely inconsiderate.
Yes.
Of everybody, with the.
I don't want to. It's not. I'm not trying to fat shame him or anything. It's just,
I used to be 295 pounds in 2012. Okay, I'm now 215. So I mean, listen, it's okay if you're fat. No one hates you because you're fat, but you don't. When I was fat, I wasn't showing it off. Like I wasn't out there to look at the big sexy. And if you're fit, not everybody wants to see that. Not everybody just wants to see everyone's body. It's just one of those things.
I just don't want to see Alex Jones doing it. I don't want to see somebody who's an asshole doing it. I have dated. If somebody is overweight, it's not a consideration to me personally over whether I'm attracted to them or not.
Right.
Some of my biggest crushes, and I don't mean that as a pun either, have been dudes who are overweight and balding. It's not. That's not my consideration.
Right.
I don't want to see Alex Jones aping Vladimir Putin. I just don't want to see that.
Yeah.
And he apes Vladimir Putin. He consciously took photos of himself.
Is he recreating the photo? Is he recreating the
Yes. He took photos of himself topless on a horse to recreate Vladimir Putin pictures. Nobody wants to see this guy doing that.
What I do want to see, though, is I want the internet to go to work and Photoshop Putin and Jones on the same horse.
Like on the same horse, like they did with.
Yeah, that would be absolutely. That would be worth seeing. You know.
Absolutely, it would be.
Oh yeah. Oh man, Alex Jones. Yeah, and Eric Dubois is even worse. He's the one that's behind the flat Earth theory and the dinosaurs weren't real. That's his new. Oh
my god.
Yeah, the dinosaurs are a hoax. You know. Which is kind of just. It's only backsliding. How many 100 years in logic? You know,
I have flashbacks to that Bill Hicks sketch where he's like, where he's like making that claim, like, "Oh, I'm God, and we'll see who believes in me now."
I love Bill Hicks. Bill Hicks is I love that bit where he's got the people on the East Coast. They're talking to the people on the West Coast, and he's like.
Refresh my memory.
He's like, I got this buddy that'll call me and be like, "What are you doing today?" He's like, "Oh, I'm just chilling. It's snowing."
Oh, right.
He's like, "I'm in the pool." He's like, "Okay." So I'll call him back and be like, "What are you doing today? You're in the pool?" "Well, guess what I'm doing?" "We're reading books." "Yeah, that's right. We're evolving over here on the East Coast."
I have a debunking for him.
Oh, yeah?
There were more books sold in LA than in New York City back in, I forget which year it was that I looked this up, but it was mid-aughts. Apparently book sales were greater on the West Coast.
Wow, okay. Okay, no, and book sales are important, but they don't track what people are actually reading.
That's true.
See, I've taken a stand on this for myself. Other people can do what they want, but I love books. I buy them a lot.
Oh yeah, me too.
I will not put them on my library anymore until I've read them.
Oh, nice.
I'm not going to be that guy that has 100 awesome, just powerhouse books and like I haven't read a damn thing, you know, like no. So I have a bunch of books that I've like stashed here and there. You know, they're like all hidden. People are like, "Why don't you organize?" Like, no, I'm on my own timeline with it.
It's a moral imperative.
Yes, it's principles, dang it.
They don't earn the shelf until they've been written.
Right.
I have a ton of, when my grandfather passed, I inherited a lot of his books. And he was, you know, he went through World War II. He survived a kamikaze attack.
Wow.
He served on the USS. And he stayed in the military through the Korean War. He was a huge reader, verified warrior scholar, and would write articles for the Marine Corps Gazette on strategy and tactics.
Awesome.
So all of his books are like history and science, and he writes his own notes in the margins.
That's so cool.
Which is, it really was. So he had, you know, he had 1 or 2 copies of the Quran.
Oh, wow.
As well as, you know, a few books on religious stuff and a lot on history and, you know, the rise and fall of civilizations. And all of his notes are in the margins in his scented script. And I love them so much. He actually, I was raised, I didn't know it at the time, but I was raised as an atheist. He would not, he did not allow religion. He had a deep and abiding suspicion of religion and religious people.
Right.
And we did not go to church. And it didn't seem odd to me until my mom had me when she was, you know, rather young, when she was 19. Mm-hmm. And
my biological mother had me as very young as well, which is the reason I got adopted. So she was 18. So I was born in 70. So yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
but she, she finished. She still went through school. She had to finish school, and then she came back, and I moved in with her. And I think for every parent for a lot of parents who may or may not be into religion, it often happens that when they become parents, they feel compelled to at least introduce their kid to that, because if they don't, they feel like, oh, maybe I'm a bad parent or whatever. They feel lacking.
Well, they just want to touch that base just in case it might be true,
Right, right. Like, should I be doing this? And we went a good 2 years before I just couldn't anymore. I'm like, she stayed in it. She likes having that in her life, which is fine. But I remember the phone call. I remember hearing the phone call she made to like the youth group person and she basically just said, "Well, we tried."
Yeah.
But I couldn't. There was, I grew up in the middle of nowhere. My Sunday mornings were spent outdoors. You
sound like you had a very awesome childhood, by the way.
I liked it.
Yeah, like that's a cool way to grow up, having just the world as your playground,
Yeah, I liked it. But I can't imagine making a kid be indoors on a Sunday morning against their will. Yeah. I just can't.
Yeah. So. My parents are still very devout. I have 2 siblings that are still into it, and then 2 that aren't. One of my sisters that is not is she's married to another woman, and she lives a pretty dangerous lifestyle. She's in and out of prison. She's sober now, but she's had her problems with drugs. But my parents are amazing people. They decided years ago that they weren't going to let their faith get in the way of their relationships with their children. So you have someone like me that's total humanist, total skeptic, atheist, show me the proof. And my parents who are extremely devout, and we get along great.
Right.
Like we'll celebrate our differences with humor and love. And if there's a hot button that we know is going to damage the other one, like the relationship, we just won't go there. It's like, it's not that important. Like there's nothing that we have to say about the other person's belief or lack of a belief that is so important that it's worth damaging a relationship for.
Right.
And so that's just kind of the stance we take, and it works great. And I'm so lucky to have parents like that. But that's I've always wondered what it would be like to be raised atheist, because it seems like, for me, like I'm not mad at the Mormon Church. There's things that they do that kind of piss me off from time to time. Mm-hmm. But all in all, I've gotten pretty past a lot of those anger issues. But with a lot of people, that's not the case. But it seems like being raised as an atheist it just seems like you'd have such a head start on people trying to undo their religious conditioning that go that route. It seems like, I don't know. But
I think it's probably as varied as
the individual parents itself.
As varied as religious parents itself, because like your parents sound amazing.
Oh, they're so cool.
And not all parents are as accepting of that. I think I lucked out with my grandparents and my mom.
Very cool.
My grandparents are awesome. They rule the family. My grandmother rules the family. It was very strict. It was strict in a lot of ways, but very openly encouraging in others. We had to maintain good grades.
Yeah,
absolutely.
My parents tried so hard with me. I was dyslexic and I am dyslexic and ADD. And back then they had no idea what it was. They just knew that this kid was making his numbers backwards. So, but I had good teachers and stuff that kind of helped me through that. Yeah, my parents my mom tried so hard to get my grades up, like before school, like going through and double checking math and stuff, and just all the arguments and tears through all that stuff. But yeah, so a
large part of my family comes from Mexico.
Cool.
And my grandparents have this habit, or had this habit, I think, well, grandmother now. But back then they would adopt relatives from there to bring up here, because the Mexican educational system stops paying for education once the kid turns 15, I think, or 16.
Okay.
So one day, I have an uncle who, moved down there. A 14-year-old girl showed up on my grandparents' doorstep with a note that said, "Hi, I'm your son's kid. I saved up money, and with the help of my grandmother, I am now here with you because this is where I want to be." She
Welcome.
spoke. Welcome.
Wow.
Her name is also Anna Maltese.
Wow.
Her full name and title is Major Anna Maltese of the United States Marine Corps.
That is awesome.
She is an awesome, badass woman. She speaks 4 languages fluently now. She didn't speak English when she got here, but by the time she graduated high school, she was in all honors classes, including English. She went right into the Marine Corps because my grandfather was in the Marine Corps, and she was like, "Well, I don't know what else to do. I'll go into the Marine Corps."
There you go.
And she is an absolute credit to this country. But when she was going through high school, my grandmother and my grandfather would basically do the same thing with her that your mom did with you, which is like lead her through not just homework, but translating the homework for her with the help of one of the other, probably kids that they had adopted that were one of my cousins.
Sounds like you have some amazing grandparents.
Yeah, they're kind of the best. But they kind of did the same thing. They would sit down with her every night and help her with her homework, and in some cases, like, just basically dictate to her what it was supposed to be. And when she graduated high school, she went to, I forget which teacher it was, but she said, "I have to tell you something. My grandmother was doing my homework for me sometimes." And the teacher looked at her and said, "I know."
It's all about the effort. Yeah.
It's all about this, and look what happens. So,
yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, I have, my family has roots in Mexico also, a little different. It actually is kind of.
Mine's from Guadalajara and Barra de Navidad.
Juarez, Calanea, the Mormon colonies, down there. So
wow.
I joke around with people that I'm part Mexican. It's my parents' family, so I'm technically adopted into this family. So, but
okay.
If you go 3 generations back in my family on both sides, it's Mormon polygamous.
Oh, wow.
It's like, this guy was performing Joseph Smith's marriages to Joseph Smith's polygamous wives, Joseph Bates Noble. That's Jesse Noble Smith, Joseph Smith, his dad's brother is the line I go down. So
you're connected.
Oh, yeah, my Mormon pedigree is on point, but for what it's worth. So our cabin that we have a cabin in the White Mountains in Arizona, in Alpine, and it was homesteaded back then. And when the Mormons were dipping out of the U.S. to escape polygamy charges, that was the spot that they would stay. And so both sides of the family, 3 generations back, are white guys with their white wives living in Mexico but having kids in Mexico. And so I'll joke with my Mexican friends, be like, "Yeah, I'm part Mexican. Look at me." Like, and they're like, "Come on, bro." And I'm like, "Dude, don't take away my Mexican American heritage. My parents drummed that into me as a kid. Like, I'm proud of it." And they're just like, and I'm like, "Come on, bro. Out of the 2 of us, I'm the hardest working Mexican. Like, come on." And they would just be like, "Bro, you're a white Mexican. You're a güero. You're a blanco." And I'd be like, "Yeah, but so I'd have fun with it."
I love Mexico. I've been all over it. I've been, of course, all the border towns, but I've been to Cancun and Ensenadas. I've been to Cabo. I think Mexico is amazing, and I hope that the troubles they have down there improve, because there's a lot of amazing people down there, a lot of good, hardworking, wonderful people down there. And the way I look at this planet is we're all here. It's all kind of the same neighborhood, and maybe certain neighborhoods are better than others, but I really hope that we can make this planet livable for everybody. But
I agree.
That's the way I look at it.
On that one, and just say it's around the world last time I checked.
Yeah, exactly. So, let's talk about, before we're going super long, but the conversation is so good, I don't think anyone will mind. But let's talk about Theodore Roosevelt a little bit.
Let's.
Now, I have a video on my YouTube channel about the public land debate, and there he is. Yeah, that is awesome. Yeah,
I think that's up there. I have the GI. I have the also special edition GI Joe Theodore Roosevelt action figure. Figure next to my Obama action figure. So
that's awesome. That's awesome. No, but there's a video on my channel where I'm standing. It's the only one where I'm standing in front of the forest, and I'm at my cabin, and I'm talking about the public land debate, and I'm talking about why public land is so cool and why it needs to stay public, and I get into a couple different reasons, but I talk about Theodore Roosevelt. I talk about the Antiquities Act a little bit, and how unique it is, and how revolutionary of a concept it was, and how when you travel, because I've driven all across this country in a car, and when you travel and there's giant tracts of untouched land, it's untouched for a reason. It's untouched because people aren't allowed to touch it, because it belongs to everyone.
Amen.
And that is Theodore Roosevelt, 100%. Without him, we wouldn't have that. And it's so
absolutely.
Oh, it's in the quote that he drives home the concept on. I actually say it's kind of my mic drop moment at the end. I end the video with this quote. It says, "The greatest good for the greatest number applies to the number within the womb of time. Compared to those now alive, form but an insignificant fraction. Our duty to the whole, including the unborn generations, bids us restrain an unprincipled present-day minority from wasting the heritage of these unborn generation. The movement for conservation of wildlife and the larger movement for the conservation of our natural resources are essentially democratic in spirit, purpose, and method." Yeah, that is such a poetic quote from such a force of a man about such an important topic. Like, yeah.
Sorry.
No, you're fine. You're fine. I don't think people realize some of the stuff that Theodore Roosevelt brought us, because we're taught that he was a hunter and adventurer, and we're taught that he was the fighter, and it's like they portray him in school as like the alpha male, when in reality he was a leader, and he was a deep thinker.
Yes.
So you know more about him than I do.
So we'll start with conservation, I guess. He was absolutely, without a doubt, he's up on Rushmore for a reason.
Absolutely.
He saw the issue of conservation as essential to democracy. He would compare and contrast it to the fact that beautiful tracts of land were available only privately in Europe. Mm-hmm. That you have these hunting grounds and these forests and everything. They were under private. A lot of reason
why people left England to come to here.
Right, exactly. And how things get despoiled. He had a very personal connection to it from a very early age. He was very outdoorsy. He was very shy. He was nearsighted and sickly, and he wasn't expected to make it out of childhood because he was so sick.
And that guy had a fighting spirit that just wouldn't quit.
It was, and part of it, at the core of it, was his love for his dad. Like, he idolized his dad, and his dad took an interest, more than most dads did in that day, in the rearing of his children. He was very, very involved, and he was very involved especially with his son Theodore. And he would talk in his memoirs about how, when he would have a coughing fit, his father would just carry him and walk him up and down the hallway. And he said, I took strength from him.
That's good parenting. It reminds me of when. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was going to let you compose yourself there and just kind of. Well, my dad's a severe asthmatic, and when he was a kid, my grandpa used to drive him to the top of South Mountain in Phoenix, so he could breathe.
Oh.
So I mean, I get that. That's
exactly the same way then.
Yeah.
So one day his father sat him down and he said, Theodore, you have the mind, but you have not the body. And the mind cannot go far without the body. So you have to make your body, and it's going to be hard work, but I know you can do it. And I'm going to give you, and he gave him the choice of how he was going to build the body. And young Theodore said, I want to take up boxing. And his dad said, all right, boxing it is. So they were an incredibly wealthy family. They made their money on, I think, early on in like window making or something.
It was glass. I used to be a window.
Yeah, glass.
Yeah.
And, his father just basically inherited a ton of money and became a philanthropist. And so he hired, a boxing instructor who put young Theodore on a strict regimen of, exercise. And they had this whole room with these machines, and this scrawny little asthmatic kid would be doing his best to pull on them and work out. And he built his body. And it was all because he had this loving dad who he idolized. So he was able to take that into his love of all things outdoorsy. Wow. And when he sort of came of age, he sunk some of his inheritance into two ranches, the Elkhorn Ranch and the Maltese Cross Ranch.
Very cool.
And yeah, it's like a little connection, I like to think.
We're tight.
We're like that. And later on, he married Alice Lee, who became Alice Lee Roosevelt. And she was pregnant. And on the same day, Valentine's Day, February 14th, both his wife and his mother died in their home. His mother from, I think, tuberculosis, and his wife Alice from Bright's disease, which was covered up by the pregnancy. Like, they didn't know that it's a kidney disease.
Wow.
And immediately afterward, for 3 days, he just locked himself away in an upstairs room, and nobody knew. Like, they just heard him pacing back and forth, and he was like getting his grief out. And he came out of that room and he said, I have to get out of this house. I'm going out west. I'm going to go to the ranch. And he went out west, and he writes about this in his memoirs. He does not talk about his wife. He very rarely mentioned Alice after this, because it was such a source of grief for him, and he had his own way of processing grief. But he went out west, and it was a balm to his spirit. It gave him comfort, and he felt that he had a personal debt to the lonely spaces of the Badlands of the Dakotas, and he saw the frontier. He saw the frontier like before it.
The American Serengeti before it.
The American Serengeti.
Yeah. By the way, they're trying to recreate that. There's a American Prairie Reserve. There's a couple ranches. I want to say it's Wyoming, Montana area that they've bought, and they're buying up all the ranches in between the two of them to recreate, and it will be open for hunting. Like, it will be managed. So they're like, we want to see it. We don't want to hear. We want to recreate the American Serengeti. So it should be, it's a work in progress, but the American Prairie Reserve is trying to make it happen.
Shut up and take my money.
Exactly. And they're serious. They say they want to have it up within this lifetime. Like
I would so see that.
Oh yeah, it's American Prairie Reserve. Check it out.
I will. So he was. It was not just that, but he saw for the first time, being out there, how people who were not on the, who were not scions of industry, lived, and he became kind of, and that was why he became a badass of the people, as it said. He met people who were out of his social caste and was like, oh, well, this is wonderful. I love meeting Americans, and it changed how he viewed, certain aspects of society. He was that also helped fuel his democratizing drive for this. It was one of those. He declared that all of these wild spaces should be kept alive as our American heritage.
Right.
And the dedication, I think, on the Grand Canyon is.
Have you been to the Grand Canyon?
I have not yet. I have not made that pilgrimage.
I was supposed to hike it 2 weeks ago, and I had a wedding I had to go to, so we had to postpone it.
Move the wedding to the Grand Canyon. Oh my
God! I know, right? Have a soup pie. It's supposed to be amazing. I have a lot of friends that are going. I'm going next year, no matter what. So,
I will join you on that.
All right, I'll make it happen.
It's as an American and as a disciple of Theodore Roosevelt, peace be upon him. It's one of those places you have to go to. But he was on a whistle-stop tour of the West when he went through these areas and visited. And this was when he met John Muir and that famous camping trip that he spent under the sequoias. But you have to remember, you gotta remember, he was the most prolific writer we have ever seen. And so, his and he loved to talk. So his off the cuff speeches were, still things of beauty and grandeur. And
that quote that I just read is eloquent.
Right.
Eloquent. If nothing, it is eloquent.
His oh God. So his dedication at the Grand Canyon was simply leave it as it is.
Mm-hmm.
You cannot improve upon it. Mm-hmm. The ages have been at work on it, and man can only mar it. And we take it for granted today. We take that sentiment for granted today. But the reason why we take it for granted is because of him. Mm-hmm. For that day, it was revolutionary.
Yeah, no one was thinking about that. They were looking at timber rights and mineral rights, and like, we could mine the shit out of this and make so much money. This land is so rich with resources. And he was like, hold up.
Right.
To ruin it for everyone that comes. He was the first person that was like, these future generations deserve to see what we saw, not just hear about it.
Leave it alone. Don't fuck it up.
And with the Antiquities Act, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, that his staff was working up till midnight.
The Midnight Forests Act.
Yes.
Yep.
And they would have added more to it if they'd had more time. He was like, we're not done. Like, there's much more out there.
So the Fulton Amendment was added on because the timber industry in Oregon was like, you can't fuck with us.
Right.
And he was like, all right, well, I have to include the amendment or the act won't get passed. So he huddled down with Gifford Pinchot, who was the chief forester at the time. Mm-hmm. And we'll get into him in a second. But they just started declaring large swaths of land as reserves. Okay, this is going to be a reserve. This is a national park. This is this. This is that. Yeah. And it's like, fucker, you come for the king, you best not miss, motherfucker.
Exactly. Like, I am the president. I have the power of the pen.
And that's the thing that I keep coming back to, is he used law in creative ways. Like you think like, oh, federal government
causes.
Right. And it was like, okay, well, I'm going to apply this to the, like, wildlands hadn't been, nobody had thought to declare them as national monuments before. That was, monuments were things built by humans.
Well, but because of what he did, North America is one of the only continents to go through a mass settlement and still retain the bulk of its megafauna.
Right.
Like, I mean, like Africa still has its megafauna. It hasn't gone through a mass colonization. But yeah, like Europe, megafauna's gone. North America, the elk that we have here are amazing. Like just the deer.
The bison were brought back from extinction, from the edge of extinction.
There's a guy named Dan Flores that Joe Rogan's had on his podcast. I know I mentioned him a lot. He's a strong influence, but he's got such interesting people sometimes. And he has a buffalo book where he talks about how they brought the bison back. And it was a couple of buffalo hunters that were like, you know what? I think I know where some are at. And they'd go and they'd round up calves and they'd bring them in. And that's the reason we have buffalo, is because these guys halfway through the slaughter were just like, or not halfway, but at some point into the slaughter, we're like, This is bad. Like, we need to do something real quick. And I think I know where their some are at. And in fact, I think only something like 30% of the bison in North America are genetically pure bison. The rest have auric DNA in them because there were so few of them. We had to breed them with cows. But there's a population that popped up in Utah, and then I think one from Wyoming and one other herd. But
there's one in South Dakota that
is it genetically pure? That might be the third one then. But they're all private. Like, they're not public herds or anything. Well, I think the one in Utah was public, but now is private because of what that. It's not every day you find genetically pure bison. So I'm okay if someone's like, okay, these aren't getting hunted anymore. These are getting bred. I'm okay with that. But Theodore Roosevelt just had such an impact on anybody that's ever gone on a hike, anybody that's ever gone camping, anybody that's a hunter, a fisherman, a rock climber, anything. Like, if he for what he's accomplished, he's the most underrated president in particularly in that group. But just you
absolutely agree.
Yeah, you get it.
And it's not just conservation is the thing that he's known for, besides the whole trust busting.
Yeah.
But it's interesting how he ties in everything else, because the Rough Riders, for instance, so we'll just take those. Yeah. That was the first volunteer cavalry regiment we've ever had, the only one.
Wow.
And he brought in, it was a complete reflection of his own life. He brought in the polo players from Yale and Harvard.
Yeah.
And the old, like the Western
cowboys and
guys. And from your state, you had Bucky O'Neill, who was one of the commanders. Who sadly got shot, but was played by Sam Elliott in John Milius's 1997 made-for-TV movie about the Rough Riders.
I'd have to. Sam Elliott's awesome.
Right.
Yeah, for sure. Big Lebowski. Hey,
God. Touches just turns to gold.
When you were talking earlier about your grandpa giving you books, my grandpa was a Marine also. He was a big Louis L'Amour fan, and so what I inherited from him when he passed was his entire Louis L'Amour collection with the Sackets, and of course
Louis L'Amour.
Louis L'Amour. Oh, if you like westerns, a good portion of the westerns you've seen on TV are written by Louis L'Amour. Like, he wrote Shane, he wrote Hondo. He wrote Writing for the Brand. He's awesome. And his books, like, you can give them to kids, and even though they're gritty westerns, they're not like, the content isn't so rough that kids can't read them,
Okay.
But he's got these books. He's got tons of books, and not all of them are westerns, but most of them are. But there's a family called the Sackets in them, and there's a boy named Tyrell Sackett, and they're a family from Missouri that move up to Montana to work cattle, and some of them find gold and things like that. But it's just the whole frontier story told through the eye of this family, and this kid's a badass. Like he's a born gunfighter. He's born into a family, the Sackett's and I can't remember the other family, but there's a feud, and he ends it.
McCoys, nice.
A lot similar. He ends it by killing the guy on his wedding day when he's 14, the day before they move to Montana. So he's getting out of town, and they try to. It's so good, but the older brother's name's Orrin, and it's Orrin, Tell, and Tyrell, and Orrin is played by Sam Elliott. Tom Selleck plays Tell, and then I can't remember the guy that plays Tyrell, but yeah, check those out. Good book, super the Daybreakers. That's the name of the book that you want to start with.
I'm going to Google that.
If that one doesn't hook you in, then Louis L'Amour might not be for you, but it's a good one. So
I'll absolutely read it.
Right on.
One of the things that people don't normally associate with Theodore Roosevelt, interestingly, is feminism.
Really?
Really. And
that's interesting.
We actually have a lot to thank him for. His 1880 Harvard law thesis could have been on pretty much anything, but it was on, I believe the title was The Practicability of the Equality Between the Sexes, in which he states in his very, when he states something, he states it in a declarative way.
Yeah. He's got a great command of the English language.
Yes, he does. And he stated in no uncertain terms that not only were women capable of doing any job a man could do, but that we legally ought to be allowed to, and furthermore, we should be paid equally for it.
Wow.
That the woman should not take the husband's name upon marriage, and that given the training, we would make excellent combatants. He was absolutely unshaken in this belief.
Wow.
And, I mean, the world still hasn't caught up to Theodore Roosevelt.
What a radical, amazing, revolutionary idea for the time.
If you think about the fact that this was 16 years after the Civil War ended, you get some idea of how forward-thinking
it was, yeah.
And he used this to his advantage in conservation, interestingly, because when he went to declare Pelican Island a refuge, the backstory to that is these birds were getting wiped out due to the millinery trade and also, development.
Yeah.
But there's a certain, species of stork called the marabou, which, the males only grow these particular feathers during the mating season, and they were really sought after for hats during the time, which, as you know from photos, were festooned with birds and everything. And they were driving these birds to extinction. And, as he said,
the early hat industry in early America, almost leveled how many beavers, how many species, it tore through them. Yeah.
So he was, and to him, as he said, later on in his life, the extinction of a species I liken to all the works of a great artist being destroyed.
Yeah.
That was his view on this. And it was, again, completely revolutionary to mainstream thought. So he had championed, he had always had the votes of women, and suffrage was not universal at that point. But he reached out to these women's suffrage groups, and he said, look, I need you to do me a solid. And I'm totally paraphrasing.
Right.
I need you to do me a favor. I've always had your back, right?
Mm-hmm.
Your hat fashions are driving birds to extinction.
Wow.
And it is tearing at my soul. Could you please do something? And they were like, yep. So they launched
For you, we got this.
For you, yes. We will stop putting birds on our hats. And after that, hats began becoming a lot less bird festooned.
Right. Yeah. Okay.
And he was able to build some political capital on that. He was able to cash in some political capital when he did that.
Well, that's the thing about Roosevelt. It seems like the favors that he cashed in on were favors for the greater good rather than favors for him and his homies. You know, it's just, just
couldn't be bought. He could not.
Just an amazing leader at the right time. That video that I referenced earlier, I'm at my cabin in Alpine, and the section that we have is about, I think it's 38 acres is what we have. But that's my grandpa, and then his brother has some, and then his sister has about that, and then so it's a big unit. When your closest neighbor is 200 yards and it's a relative, and then it's 200 yards away from that another relative, and and even with the wildfires that went through there, our area is in a mild valley. It's actually coming in. There's a draw that comes in off public land, and then our land, and then it kind of goes through that. But I grew up thinking that's what a cabin was. Like, it was solitude. And I grew up thinking that, like, if you had neighbors, it wasn't a cabin. A cabin was passed down through the ages. So I got invited to a friend's cabin in high school. Very nice cabin. We pull into a neighborhood in the Pines, and I'm like,
neighbors?
Like, what? Like, and it was an acre lot. It wasn't like it was a tiny little neighborhood, but it still was just so foreign. Of like, I thought the cabin was solitude out in the middle of nowhere with, we'd ride ATCs on public land, and we'd drive, we'd be going for hours before we turn around. In fact, there was times where we're like, how far is it back to the cabin? Okay, we're gonna have to walk 2 miles to get gas and then come back for the AT. Stuff like, just because it was just, there's so much land up there in the White Mountains that just you could never explore it all. And then the wildlife, like, me and my sister came back from my cabin the last time. We almost hit a bear. I'd never seen a bear cross the freeway before, ever. And this thing, it was a big black bear. I was just like, whoa. And, she's driving. She would have hit the damn thing if I hadn't said anything. But, it was, my love for the mountains, especially, the whole concept of public land, and the fact that the only way that anybody can take that away from us is if we give it to them. And assholes are talking about it and trying to make it happen. And it's
that's what keeps me up at night. I mean, besides all the rest of the stuff that's happening, more than, because it's a personal thing. It's a personal insult.
Well, and not only that, but it's like, you guys are trying to make a decision that affects people that haven't been born. Right. And you're trying to say that your thought of making that money now versus them having something special that Americans have always had. Every single American, owns this land, and we can all go and enjoy it. We can all go camping. We can all go hunting. We can all go fishing. You may have to pay to play, but these areas cost money to maintain. It costs money to keep them beautiful and amazing.
And that's one of the lines of attack that they're using. They're trying to increase the fees for the national parks and say, they're so we have to jack the fees. Well, fuck you, first of all, and second, sure, fine. Yeah. Like, I will donate a kid. That's what it takes.
Well, not only that, but if they look at the logistics, like, they're throwing that argument out and then kind of walking away. But if you were to take the logic from that argument and go, okay, it's expensive for the federal government, to maintain these lands. Okay. Who's got a better budget? You're going to give them to the state?
Yep.
No. It is expensive to maintain these lands. But the system that's in place is the best one we have. We don't have any systems that can manage these lands better and keep them. And it's not just people we have to protect them from. It's forest fires. Mother Nature doesn't want these lands to stay untouched either.
Right. And we're learning more about how forest fires, rejuvenate actual lands and how these can only propagate. So we have to learn about, managing fires instead of just putting them out. It's a whole thing.
But it's one of those things that the cost doesn't bring any ROI, except for it doesn't bring any financial ROI. But I'm not articulating this very well, but the non-financial return on investment that you get through the ages could never touch what some oligarchy wants to put in his bank account on it. It's just,
and once it's gone, it's gone.
It's gone. Never come back. And people can try, but no, it's just, it's so important.
That was the thing about him, is that there was a conservation movement at that time. Mm-hmm. It was nascent. It was not politically connected until him. But once he was in power, he had access to some of the best people for those jobs. And one of them was Gifford Pinchot. And the thing is, they had not, Pinchot modeled the forestry service on the Knights of England, basically. He was, that was their whole approach to it. That was their template. And he used to have, these early foresters up there, at his cabin, just, telling tales of heroism and, casting themselves in this, like, we're going to protect these forests from depredations. It's going to be glorious. It's going to be noble. And I think that's important. And that's something that people don't sometimes forget about government. We like to cast it as a horrible thing, some
oppressive force or something.
Oppressive and blah, blah, blah. But it can be a real fucking force for good. I mean, you have the Civil Rights Act, for fuck's sake. We I can vote now. Like, it can be fucking awesome if you have people in it who believe in it as a force for good, and that's not a subjective thing. Like, you have people in it who have been in it, who have used it to great detriment, and who have thought of themselves as doing good by that. But you can see objective results that prove that not to be true.
Right.
But I mean, one of the most courageous people in government was Lyndon Johnson.
Yeah.
When he signed the Civil Rights Act, when he signed the Voting Rights Act, he was like, look, we're going to lose the South, and that's going to fuck up our party. And everybody was like, yep. And he's like, yep, gonna sign it anyway.
Gotta happen. It's gotta happen. And people, leaders in history who have done things like that, who have stood in the face of the hurricane of opposition, tightened up their fist, put their chin down, and kept moving forward.
Yep.
Those are people that their impact on today's society is forgotten by the masses on a day-to-day level. Like, no one takes that into consideration. No one who's ever benefited from the Civil Rights Act the Civil Rights Act remembers it on a day-to-day.
Unless you're in the Civil Rights Act.
Right, unless you're totally into that. But I mean, but the general population, your typical hunter isn't thinking Teddy Roosevelt every time he goes out into the forest. We forget about these giants and these amazing people that have done such good things. It's important that they get a new light gets shed on them in things like podcasts. It's important that we have these conversations so that people can be like, oh yeah, that's right. Lyndon Johnson did sign the Civil Rights Act. There's a podcast I listen to by a guy named Jocko Willink, and he's an MMA guy, but he's a black belt in jiu-jitsu is his big thing. And he's a Navy SEAL who wrote a book called Extreme Ownership and Way of the Warrior Kid. And he was the commander of the United States forces in the Battle of Rinaldi in Iraq.
Oh.
Legit dude. His podcast is legit. And where was I going with this? We
have to remember people that.
Yeah. Well, no. What he said, because I used to think, I've been all over the political spectrum, and I was born very conservative. If you ask my conservative friends how I am, they'll say I'm liberal. If you ask my liberal friends, they'll say I'm moderate. I would say I'm pretty moderate.
Okay.
But I used to really think of the government as an impressive force, particularly with war and things like that. And he goes on Sam Harris's podcast and just drops knowledge. Like, boom, like, listen, the Iraqi army needs us there. Like, our presence is the difference between 1,000 Iraqi soldiers fleeing in the face of 200 ISIS agents versus getting locked and loaded and going in to get some. And he talks about the United States being a benevolent government. And Sam Harris is kind of like, well, what? And he's like, well, yeah, man, like, if we kill civilians in a drone strike, by the way, ISIS kills way more civilians than we do, and we'll offer them money. Hey, let us rebuild your house. Let us give you some money for this young man in your family that was killed that was your breadwinner. Let us help you. He's like, no other enemy over there, or he's no other entity over there is offering that kind of stuff. He's like, yeah, we make mistakes. Yeah, we're not doing everything right all the time. But all in all, we're a benevolent government. And I was just kind of like, wow, yeah, I mean, that argument gets thrown out. Yeah, they killed all these people and then just offered to give them money. Well, how else are you supposed to try to make it right? Like, that's what they're trying to do. Things are just a little more complicated than a snapshot of an issue, which is why I have podcasts like this. I like to get into the nuances of things. But the United States government is imperfect. Nothing is perfect except for maybe the scientific method. But
pretty fair method.
Yeah, but it's so far ahead of so many other governments and so many other organizations of power that all we can do is just hope that we're continuing to put the right people in charge of what we're trying to do, and just hope that these people that we trust are going to do right by their constituency is all we can do as American citizens. So
I think that's the best approach that we can hope for. There is a lot that the United States government has done, which I take issue with.
And I'm not saying that they haven't. I'm just saying
I know you're.
Jocko's statement on that made me think different. Like, wow, okay,
right.
Maybe there's more to it. But yes, you're absolutely totally correct. It
is. It does become very, very complicated when you talk about the areas where the U.S. has gone in and meddled.
I have a buddy that is he lives in Abu Dhabi, and he's an assistant professor at their military college there. And I've had him on we've recorded a couple podcasts, but we're talking about the troubles in the Middle East, and it's so extensive. And you combine that with the lag of the internet, that I'm just going to wait till he's visiting family in Chicago this Christmas to where we can have like a 4-hour podcast and just be like, all right, dude, explain this to me like I'm a highly intelligent 12-year-old. So, but yeah, it's just.
But yeah, I totally understand what you're saying. And that's why I can't get behind the whole, going back to Reagan quote of the government is the most scary words that you can hear are, hi, I'm from the government and I'm here to help. It's like, why are you going to vote people into positions where they don't believe in the whole job? Essentially, why was John Bolton ever a UN ambassador when after he said what he did about the UN? Why would you go out for a job that you don't believe in? Like, that makes no sense.
Yeah.
So, I mean, the thing is, as clunky as the federal government can be, as bureaucratic as it can absolutely be a force for good. And there are things that I would like to see changed. I would like to see, there's an amendment that's being discussed about Even though it would be impossible at this point to abolish the Electoral College, there's an amendment being discussed about having it be by law that the Electoral College has to vote along with the popular vote, which is essentially how a lot of laws get passed, which is, by baby steps. Incremental change is still change.
Yeah.
And
I think term limits for Congress and legislator would be beneficial as well.
I think that is something worth looking into.
Yeah.
There are things that you can do in government which are creative and are good, and I think when you get people in who Theodore Roosevelt had his haters in his day, and even now to this he does. But he was undoubtedly a force for good for most Americans, and I go by that model. I mean,
he's left positive marks on every American that has come after him as a leader.
Yes, and he remade the presidency into the modern one it is today. I mean, no other president before him went out on the hustings and campaigned. That was just not something that you did.
Yeah.
You had your surrogates go out, which is why he campaigned for McKinley during the 1900 election. He, in fact, interestingly, do you know the story of how he was chosen as the vice presidential slot?
No, I haven't.
Oh, this is great. So he was the civil service commissioner and then later governor of New York.
Okay.
And in that capacity, he managed to piss off Senator Thomas Collier Platt, who was basically the patronage guy. He was the boss of the Senate. Yeah. And he made it. He would not vote for Platt's guys, to put them into power automatically. Platt was like, hey, I helped you become the governor, so now maybe you'll, and Theodore was like, if they pass muster, sure, but not if they don't. And Platt was like, what? This just isn't done. So
you didn't realize you were talking to Teddy Roosevelt here, sir.
Right. You poor motherfucker. You
exactly.
You had no idea. So come 1899, Platt was like, I've had my fill of this guy. We got to bury him. We're going to bury him. And the way we're going to do it is we're going to put him on the vice presidential ticket, because that's where careers go to fucking die.
Yeah.
It is the most, John Adams found that out. He was like, this is the most useless job in the world. Why am I doing this? So they approached him with it, and Roosevelt was like, no, I'm not going to do that. And he knew exactly what was going on. But, with subsequent talks, he was like, well, I never said I definitely wouldn't do it. And it started becoming appealing to him.
Yeah.
So he discovered that he loved going out on the hustings and campaigning. I mean, he loves talking in front of a group of people. He loves connecting with people.
Yeah.
He would bring his buddies out on the trail for McKinley. And they needed someone really popular to be on the ticket with McKinley, because McKinley, as liked as he was facing an opponent that everybody else liked, and he was not really charismatic.
Wasn't McKinley looked at as someone who was kind of a good leader but kind of soft? And that's
And I mean, it took him a while to get into the Pan Am War, which was very much Roosevelt's doing.
Yeah, I remember that.
But so McKinley won, and so all these senators are toasting in the Republican Party, are toasting themselves, and they're congratulating themselves on getting rid of Roosevelt finally. And the only one who is sweating bullets and having heart palpitations is Mark Hanna. And at one point he turns to the rest of them and he goes, do you realize that damn cowboy is one heartbeat away from the presidency now? And they all looked at him and they were like, oh, come on. What's the worst that could happen?
Right.
And then 6 months later, at the Pan American Exposition in Buffalo, New York, McKinley is gunned down by Czolgosz. And several days later, he passes away, and Thomas Collier Platt has engaged in an act of true situational irony and brought his worst nightmare to fruition.
Yeah, kind of shot himself in the foot there with that, didn't he?
Yeah,
that's awesome. That is an awesome story. Yeah, he talk about crushing your enemies. You know, like talk about rallying hard and crushing your enemies. That's a great story.
It is awesome. It's delightful.
Right on. Anna, this is like a 3-hour podcast now. I know. We may have to release it in 2. Probably not.
Yeah,
we'll probably just release it all. But
or just edit it down to an hour.
There's so much good content here. Before we go, what kind of music are you listening to these days?
Oh, gosh. It's kind of a mix. What am I listening to these days? What am I listening to?
I've been all over the place this week. I've been listening to The Roots. I've been listening to Mad Child. And I've been listening to The Used, Led Zeppelin, and Jimi Hendrix. So I've been all over the place. But yeah.
For me, it's been Rush and The Birthday Massacre.
There you go. That's some good stuff. All right. Right on. My cousin's a drummer, and when he talks about Rush, he just refers to Neil Peart as God. So
yes, and deservedly so.
Yeah,
they're awesome.
Yeah, they're pretty badass. Yes. Right on. Do you have any shout outs or sponsors or anything that you want to, plug before we dip out?
I would like to give one quick shout out to Tess Rafferty and the Take Back the Workplace March, which is happening on Sunday.
Okay.
It's a march in response to all the sexual harassment allegations and revelations that have been rocking social media since the Harvey Weinstein revelation, but also going back to the fact that we elected a serial sexual assaulter to the White House via the Electoral College, not the popular vote.
Yeah, there is that also.
And there is that, which I will go to my grave cursing. But it's happening at Hollywood and Highland, and by the time this podcast comes out, it might have already happened. But
I'm going to try to get this out today so we can get some.
Okay.
Yeah. So.
Awesome. Well, if you're in the LA area, and you want to come Hollywood and Highland,
dozens of listeners in the LA area, Anna. Like awesome. I probably have 15 people in California that are going to be.
This. I have a feeling it's more popular than that.
It's gaining ground. It's gaining ground.
If you're in the area and you want to come by Hollywood and Highland tomorrow at 10, it's going to be going on. We have a Fox LA a Fox LA anchor who is chairing it, Lauren Silva.
Very cool.
And a lot of writers and comedy writers will be there. I designed the logo for it, so I'm
awesome.
But
it rocks, of course.
Workplace.com. And
I think you cut out there again. I want to make sure people hear that.
Oh, sorry.
That
the website is takebacktheworkplace.com.
At theworkplace.com.
Takebacktheworkplace.com.
Takebacktheworkplace.com. Okay, yeah, it was cutting out there a little bit. I wanted to make sure that people got it. So
gotcha.
Takebacktheworkplace.com. And this is an important cause. I don't know a ton of actresses in Hollywood, but I do have a few that I'm friends with. And, Hollywood is, as far as the film industry, has always been one of those industries that kind of has this bad odor around it as far as this topic goes that no one ever really talks about. And it's as much as it's going to hurt some people, like we were talking about earlier, how Kevin Spacey has broken our hearts these last couple weeks. It's going to hurt. Go ahead.
And now George Takei.
Yes, and it's going to hurt. It's going to crush a lot of our heroes, but it's something that needs to happen. It's important that women feel safe in whatever industry that they decide to pursue. And systematic mistreatment, men as well, systematic mistreatment of any person in any industry is something that needs to go away. And with the internet and the organization of how people are these days, we're seeing a lot of progress. It's going to take time, but marches like these, like takebacktheworkplace.com, are important. And so anybody that's listening to this for the next couple of days, please show up to this march. Show some support. If they can't show up, is there any other way that they can donate? Can they buy T-shirts or anything like that at the website?
I actually have to look that up because I've been just going through. I have to make a quick correction. It's takebacktheworkplacemarch.com.
Okay.
I got that wrong. I've been mostly communicating via email with the organizers, and it's not been the website has not been right in front of me.
Totally understandable.
Right away.
It's cool.
There is a GoFundMe if you want to go to that. It's up on the website at takebacktheworkplacemarch.com. There's a little donate button. You can just give whatever you can. It'll all be appreciated, and the rest of it, whatever exceeds the goal, will be donated to a charity that helps this cause at some point.
Yeah, very, very important cause, not just for women today, but like we've talked about so much in this podcast, for future generations as well. So
exactly, standing on the shoulders
of giants every day. Anna, you are awesome. I am so grateful that you came on this podcast. I'm grateful that my listeners get to meet you now and get to know you. Anna Maltese on Twitter.
To meet you.
Yes, we've had some good correspondence, and it's been great to talk. We've got to do this again sometime soon. So
let's do that.
All right, cool. Thank you so much. Planet Earth, thank you for joining us today. Please enjoy this podcast, and above everything, be excellent to each other.